and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to an all-new season of the UKSimRacing Community League GT3 League Season 10, as brought to you on the premier sim racing platform available only on PC, known as iRacing. And today, we're an all-new season getting underway, and we've been a special milestone for UKSimRacing, indeed the league as a whole. What better way to kick off proceedings than a classic circuit here in Austria? It's the Spielberg region circuit of the Red Bull Ring. A classic indeed in the fact that it's multitude of straights, heavy braking zones and sweeping corners. It is a circuit that puts our drivers through the fundamental bases of what it means to be a GT3 class racer. And as everybody gets ready in the background, you can see our drivers practicing currently. Well, we've got plenty in store today in terms of the racing. We've also got an absolutely action-packed schedule, and whilst the core racing has remained the same, we've also got some key updates which have been made to the rules and regulations, and also how certain aspects of the racing play out. And we'll elaborate on all that and more as we head into tonight's programme. But you're tuning in live via the official UKSimRacing YouTube channel. Indeed, if you go to youtube.com and search for UKSimRacing or UKSR, you can tune in there. And hello to all of you tuning in, and I hope you're all doing well and having a fantastic weekend. And don't be shy, feel free to say hi in the YouTube chat, and indeed let us know who you're cheering on today as our drivers get ready to go underway. In the commentary booth for this season, you have myself. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Paul Walsh, also known as TX11 or Britain the Spit, depending on what media you follow me on, and I'll be bringing you all of your racing action tonight and indeed over the upcoming rounds. But as we get ready to talk a little bit about the rounds, first we do need to just take a brief moment, ladies and gentlemen, to talk about something very dear to the hearts of both myself and the commentary booth, and also UKSimRacing. But before we go racing tonight, let's take a little bit of time to talk about mental health. At UKSimRacing, we are advocates for a positive attitude to discussing mental health, with a section of our Discord being dedicated purely to sharing stories, or indeed the drivers sharing stories, for the cause of bettering mental health. And we also aim to provide improved access to services for anyone in need of help. One of these service providers is Mind UK, and you can see their logo on screen currently, a fantastic UK-based charity which is there to fight mental health and will not stop until everyone experiencing a mental health problem gets both support and respect. Now, with the services of Mind UK being ever more critical in these times, we are proud to announce at UKSimRacing that for Season 10 of the GT3 League, we are donating £200 from the sign-up contributions for this season to Mind UK, and this follows on from the £65 worth of prize money donated to the charity from Season 9. And indeed, what better way to celebrate already an all-new season of racing, indeed what is the celebration of a decade of the GT3 League, than the contribution to Mind UK. And do remember, the racing may only be virtual, but the emotions are just as real. If you or someone you know is seeking help with their mental health, please visit www.mind.org.uk today for further information. But indeed, Mind UK, very important, mental health so ever critical, and it will be on the minds of our drivers tonight to get themselves off to the best possible positive start. And let's take you into our calendar for this season. Well, as you can see on the screen here, we have 8 rounds ahead of us, and we kick off today on Sunday the 2nd of April with our first sprint, 6 sprints, and there will also be 2 feature race rounds, and it kicks off at the Red Bull Ring in Austria. After today, we'll be making our way over to Spain for round number 2 at the Jerez Angel Nieto circuit, and that'll be on the 9th of April, and their circuit recently introduced to iRacing as of the start of 2023, and it is a circuit like no other when it comes to fast flying straights into medium speed apex corners. And then we'll be looking to Belle Isle for round number 3, making our way for our first visit to the United States of America, and heading to the Detroit City for the Belle Isle Grand Prix in the state of Michigan, and that'll be on the 16th of April. 3 sprints will be followed up by our first feature race round, the extended race round, and that'll be at the Nürburgring Gesamtstrecke, or the Nürburgring combined layout circuit, which everybody knows and loves. And indeed, you can't go anywhere without talking about the Nürburgring in round number 4, and that'll be on the 23rd of April. After that, we're taking a break week, our first mid-season break, before returning for our round 5 and the resumption of proceedings. I almost lose my voice there, and that'll be in the sprint on the 7th of May. And then going from the state of Wisconsin in the US of A, we'll be making our way into another mid-season break week before returning for round number 6 at Okayama in Japan. Now, you may be wondering at this point, why have we got a little bit of an odd set of break weeks on this schedule? Well, simply because of the fact that we do have a couple of official iRacing events, including the Nürburgring 24 hours occurring in the middle of this season. So we decided to give those break weeks in order to respect those iRacing official events, with a good number of our participants will be looking to take part in. And when we do return for round number 6 in Japan, will be the sprint on the 21st of May at the old school T1 IDA circuit, as it used to be known as. And in the penultimate round, we'll have another feature race round, and that will be in the US of A. We'll be wrapping up the championship with a double doubleheader, first in the state of New York at the Watkins Glen International Circuit with our final feature of the season on the 28th of May, and in our season finale it'll be a sprint at the Daytona Road Course Circuit in the Sunshine State of Florida on the 4th of June. Now we should point out that all of the rounds will be broadcast live apart from round number 2 at Jerez next time out, and that's for the simple reason that I will be attending the British GT Championship that weekend, the season opener at Alton Park, and therefore I won't be in place to be able to bring you the coverage, but be rest assured the post-round coverage will be as close as possible to a live broadcast, and more on that of course in a week and a bit's time. We'll tell you about when that broadcast will be at the end of today's show, but we have got an absolutely packed schedule, great circuit variety, and indeed a number of circuits which have not featured on the calendar for some time, if at all, including Jerez, and plenty for our drivers to look forward to. Now as for our circuit for today then, it is of course the Red Bull Ring Grand Prix circuit, located in Spielberg in the Styrian region of Austria, as you can see from the circuit diagram provided us by iRacing.com. Thank you to them for their circuit maps and also of course their wonderful simulator. This is a circuit that is highly controversial, not because of its corners, well indeed perhaps it is because of its corners, particularly the numbering of the corners. It's a dinner table discussion if you're motorsport fans in the family. Does this circuit have 10 or only 9 corners? And of course it's the number 2 kink which is the one that causes all the controversy. But still, putting a little bit of a dinner table joke aside, as our drivers head around here today, it's a mishmash of old school circuit architecture as they make their way across the start and finish line up towards turn number 1 and Niki Lauda corner, of course in celebration of the venerable great of Formula 1. They'll make their way through the sharp right-hander before powering their way across the first long straight up towards turn number 3. As they come through the kink of 2, of course given a corner number because it is where the MotoGP chicane is, as they make their way past the kink they'll head up into the braking zone, the uphill braking zone for what used to be known as Remus Corner, now known as AMS AG, and as they brake hard there, a very sharp right-angled right-hander, as they emerge from the hairpin at turn 3, they make their way powering downhill towards turn number 4. Coming into Rouch at turn 4, it's a downhill braking zone and therefore they'll have to brake a little bit early, but get it right on the apex there, they'll power their way for the right-hander of 5 and up towards Power Horse Corner at turn number 6. A downhill off-camber left-hander where you'll need to carry as much speed as possible to the apex, but then back it off slightly as you power on through and come down towards turn at number 7. We see the sweeping sequence of turns 7 and 8, followed up by Jochen Ring Corner at turn number 9, another off-camber right-hander that rolls downhill into the A1 Ring Corner at turn number 10 to complete the lap and start it all over again. And that's why it's an old-school circuit. There's no highly technical chicanes, nor are there any huge elevation changes. This is a very smooth circuit with gradual elevation changes throughout, but the key thing here is it's all about straight and braking zones in the first half and about sweeping medium speed corners in the second half. We're coming on to our rules for today, and this is where we've got some key changes already. Let's talk a little bit about car setup firstly. Drivers are permitted to change their car this season without penalty until the conclusion of round 3. Now this has been added to induce a little bit more car variety and give our drivers more time to be able to essentially have the opportunity to settle on a GT3 class car of their desire over the first couple of rounds, but of course this could mean that we see drivers swapping up cars from round to round in the opening rounds to maximise their points, but then they have to be aware that as of round number 3 they'll be locked into their final car of choosing. So we'll see some who dedicate themselves to a car very early on, others may try to switch cars week in and week out, and then they'll have to settle on what the score was in round number 3. Car fuel loads are restricted to 45% for all races. This is a return rule from season 9, and qualifying wise we've got a significant change here. Previously it's been closed qualifying sessions where each of our drivers are taken to an isolated instance of the circuit and they've had a limited amount of time, whereas for this season it's open qualifying, and that will mean that all the drivers head out onto circuit, albeit as split into 3 10-minute sessions. The first session will see the AM class take to the circuit, we'll then see the Pro class take to the circuit, and then we'll see the Elite class take to the circuit, but of course they're only the classes we'll be on out, and therefore it gives our drivers ample opportunity to set their lap times, but also it does mean they have to be wary of track position just as much as they do about finding the pace to set the ultimate lap. On top of this, in terms of following on our rules, in general with our races, they shall commence via a double file rolling start. There are no mandatory pit stop requirements in any of the races, but we are expecting pit stops in each of the races, normally a single pit stop in the sprint, and of course at least 2 pit stops in the extended feature. Each driver has 1 fast repair available in a given race, and should there be a significant incident during the race involving 3 or more drivers, this is new for this season, a safety car may be deployed at the discretion of the race director. Now we're not going to say who the race director is, but they are watching the race throughout, and indeed they are an impartial steward who will be keeping eyes on proceedings and may deploy a safety car if required. However, we should point out that a safety car shall not be deployed in the final 10 minutes of the given race, and therefore that means that our drivers are able to race the end unhindered even if there is a major incident. All race stewarding meanwhile shall continue to be conducted post-race. There's no live stewarding for any of the rounds. In the sprint races themselves, a driver shall receive a drive-through penalty if they accumulate 17 or more instant points, and if they pick up 25 or more, they shall be disqualified from the race event. But that's enough rules, regulation, everything in between. screen. I know you're all here for the racing. As we head back to circuit side, let's take you through our schedule for today. Times in British Summertime BST, we're now on that clock. Alternatively, Universal Coordinated Time +1 or UTC +1. We can see then the new qualifying format will start off very shortly in approximately 9 minutes time, and that'll be 40 minutes in anticipated duration, 35 minutes if everybody's able to get on and off circuit as rapidly as possible, but we have extended to 40 minutes to give our drivers a little bit of leeway time. And of course, because it's a new feature for this season in terms of the open qualifying, it may proceed a little bit slower compared to what would be most fluid that we'd expect once we get up to speed. But you just have to bear with us today as it may take a little bit longer. But of course, after that, we head to the grid at approximately 8:30 this evening, and that'll be for our 45-minute sprint race. And indeed, it's going to be an intense one there for the simple reason this circuit really does engender on sprint races, close to fast and furious racing. But with an ambient temperature currently at 25 degrees centigrade and a track temperature of 26 degrees centigrade that's currently rising while drivers putting in laps out there, it's definitely going to be a warm one here, and with clear skies as well. It's only the early hours of the morning at the moment. We can imagine tyre degradation will be a key factor. Indeed, as our drivers are getting ready to go in this opening round, well, we do have some returnee drivers from last season, but we also have one big name here, and it is Jonathan Hitchin from Symphony Esports White, who makes his way on through at turns 7 and 8 very rapidly here indeed. Now, the reason why he is a big name, I hear you ask, well, for the simple reason is he parks up there running a little bit wide and decides to head back to the pit lane. Jonathan Hitchin, a reigning champion, back from what was, if my memory serves me correctly, Season 8 of the GT3 League, where he was in the top class and absolutely took everyone to task where he could. And well, Jonathan Hitchin really has put the benchmark in terms of how to drive the GT3 in this UKSimRacing League, albeit not a participant in Season 9. And we did see some new names rise to the form, and Austin William Campbell are those who gambled it all on the Ford GT, of course, last season, but here he's back today in the 555 car for Symphony Esports White in the Mercedes AMG Evo. As he makes his way up towards turn at number 9, of course, there's a name that's returned from last season, but we should also point out that we have seen a few changes to the classes going into the season. Of course, we stuck with the same 3 classes as last season, and that's with respect to the elite drivers, who are the top class, the top of the top. Then we have the middle class of the pros, and we also have the AMs out there, who are our bottom class. Indeed, perhaps the drivers who would be the closest to the learners, if you will, or trying to continue to develop their pace. But of course, there everybody has the right to race on the circuit and enjoy the racing, and you can be sure that everyone will be giving it their all from start to finish. And well, speaking of drivers who've been promoted between classes over the course of Season 9 into Season 10, well, perhaps the most notable one, John Eddowes, is currently parked up in the pit lane, pro champion for Season 9. He's been promoted, the TT SimSport Kimi driver, back in action, but he's going to be taking the fight to a much higher tier of opposition this time, albeit that's not to belittle his previous opponents, but it was the close championship rivalry between himself and Peter Cox, but now he's got to step up even further. Meanwhile, Peter Cox has remained in the pro class, and so has Nathan Scott and his peers, as we do say hello to a good number of you there in the YouTube chat, including what is Shallow Depth, Brian Walker, the Bad Gamer, who is, I do believe, John W in the number 80 car, unless I'm mistaken there, and we'll talk a little bit more about John very shortly. That's John Woolridge, who is currently parked up in the pit lane, but we can't quite see him. And we also say hello there to MB Robbins, who says good luck to Brandon Hay, and indeed we do have Brandon Hay competing, in this series, and you see him there parked up in the privateer machine in the number 96 car, and well, you have to discern that BMW M4 dead centre of screen, albeit we can't quite get close enough to it, as I mince my words there. Indeed, we're not doing too well in that regard at the moment, but that's just excitement for going racing, I can tell you that definitely, as we do see Martin Tillin for TT SimSport Corpa making his way on down the braking zone here into turn number 4 currently, and Tillin back with a first to gain places, and also the Mercedes AMG Evo 4 tonight. But as he makes his way up towards turns 6 and 7, and downhill he goes through turn at number 6. We also got a good number of newcomers joining the series as of this season, including in the elite class Philipp Schwerker, as we do see the privateer bringing the Porsche 911 GT3R, the German driver in the 63 car, and it's going to be interesting to see how he gets on. And we also do have a few other newcomers, including Oyvind Breivik in the pro class, albeit we can't quite see him out of the circuit at the moment. He's currently in the pit lane, and as we do look to some of our AMP drivers, we have Marvin Cruz, who joins us as this season. The privateers, he makes his way through turn number 1. Wheel car on his inside there, where the Ignium Motorsport machines, I do believe, unless I'm mistaken, and they power their way up towards turn number 3. But we've got plenty of newcomers on the grid here, and it does mean that with a mix of old blood and new blood, it is definitely going to be one of those championship season openers where we could see some new names really rise high, including Matt Strand, as we see the Racing Lab AM driver making his way through turn number 7 here in the Audi R8 LMS machine. Now what's going to be interesting, of course, is we've kept the championships the same in terms of championship points are scored based on class finishing position, and you do have those 3 classes we mentioned earlier. We also have the teams championship, and we do have a grand total of what is a very impressive, as I just get things double checked here, we have in excess of 15 teams, but to be a little bit more confirmatory as to how many teams we have, in fact we have 16 teams on the grid, including what is 3 divisions, in fact 4 divisions from UKSimRacing, unless I'm mistaken. In fact I think it is 3. We've also got 2 UKSimRacing teams out there. We've also got 2 Racing Lab teams, 2 Empire Motorsport teams, and we've also got 2 Symphony Esports teams, and then we've got a couple of other teams also in the mix. So therefore a lot of rivalries will be going on from the outset, not just in the drivers classes but also in the teams championship as a whole, as we see John Doble here in the UKSimRacing Kimi machine, the American making his way down towards turn 4 and bringing the Porsche 911 today. Well, of course, with the open car choice for the first 3 rounds, we are expecting there to be a couple of cars that reign potentially popular within their classes, and I think you can already see that on the timings on the left hand side of your screen, particularly in the elite class, where we do have a large number of the contingent being made up by the Mercedes AMG Evo, and the Mercedes, of course, having a reputation for being very strong on the straight and in the acceleration zones, lacking a little bit in the corners potentially, with some understeer being innate at medium to high speed, and also some difficulty with power oversteer at low speed, so within second gear in particular. And Hekon Gestad, the Ignium Motorsport driver, who of course took the Elite Championship crown last season. In season 9 he's back for more in the number 37 car, and he's decided to switch from the McLaren MP4 12C to the Mercedes for this round. And how will he get on, of course, in a different beast of machine? Will he be able to find his footing early on? And of course he'll be taking on the very best that we've seen in the GT3 League in past seasons, and that is Jonathan Hitchin in class. And will Hitchin bring the BMW AM4, which is a reliable pick given the fact it's a bit of an all-rounder, albeit it's got quite a bit of strength on the straights. In terms of going into the qualifying session, we are currently only 3.5 minutes away from that initial transition, and we'll be seeing that transition in due course as we look to Brandon Hay here, the privateer, making his way down through a turn at number 6 into 7. And a brief word on the privateer there. He's representing, I do believe, and I think I'll be corrected in the chat if I do get this wrong by his colleagues, I believe he does represent the team of Newbridge Esports. I think that is the name there. Newbridge Esports by CRN, if I remember correctly. And as he makes his way down towards turn at number 9, turn 10, an absolutely jam-packed community is there as well, with a good number of esporting drives across simulators, and Brandon Hay, one of their finest, as he makes his way down through turn number 10. As he comes on through, we also look to a couple of more newcomers, including Steiner Sani, as he heads into turn 1 for Racing Lab AM1, and as he makes his way through here in the BMW AM4 GT3, is going to be a solid pick there, and the Amtrak we're looking to do his very utmost in order to get into the fight. And he's got also another newcomer in the form of Matt Edmondson, who you may have seen a number of times in the chats for the GT3 League in the previous seasons under the nickname of Medmo, but he's decided to get out of what is the chat room and onto the circuit himself. And good luck to Matt, and indeed to all of our drivers. And he in the 176 Ferrari, well, as he makes his way around in the 488 Evo, he'll be thinking about what he can do with a car that's not known for its acceleration in the medium to high end gears, but it's more known for its top end and also its low speed maneuverability. The only thing about this car as well is the fact that it's quite aggressive on its tyre degradation, and therefore he's got to be wary of those rear tyres and how they can potentially fall away as the race presses on. But as he heads on through right now, being in the company of other drivers and getting himself all set, we also do see one James Rankin making his way on around here. And I do believe there a little bit of an error on our overlay with regards to Mr. Rankin's name, and we will get that fixed. And we do apologise if you see the overlay update itself a few times over the course of the proceedings tonight. Of course, this being a season opener, it does mean that we're doing everything we can to load driver data in the background, and therefore we do need to update and refresh the overlay every so often. As you see, it is resolved there, and James Rankin now not known as P. James Rankin, known properly as James Rankin from CHR Motorsport, and in the number 67 BMW M4. But he joins the pro class as he makes his way on down towards turn at number 4, and well, very shortly all of our drivers will be transitioning over to that qualifying session. Approximately a minute to go now, and as he comes on down through turn at number 4 and up towards 6, well, who else can we talk a little bit about? We can also talk about Nick Wren, who joins the elite class for UKSimRacing Copa, and UKSimRacing once again in full attack mode going into this season. We saw plenty of their drivers out on the grid for the purposes of Season 9, and they're back in full force today. And as I had an opportunity to catch up with their team principal, Greg Zenyi, and he was getting ready to make his way into the pit wall box for the team. He's down there in the pit lane right now, instructing the drivers. He's not quite like Gunther Steiner, but he is a very frivolous man with regards to being the crew chief for the team. And well, I asked him, what's the mood like down at UKSimRacing today? And he was saying that it's quite the buzzing mood in amongst all the drivers, and everybody's looking forward to this season and really trying to push on. And the one thing that the team have done is they've come up with a spreadsheet for their own awards this season. With there being 3 teams, they've decided to add a little bit more competitiveness within the teams and between the drivers, whereby they're all focusing on these awards such as the most overtakes made. But the key one is the pit time, where they're going to be timing all the pit stops and seeing who has the best pit stops of the season, indeed from round to round. And therefore it just adds a little bit more of a competitive layer within the team, and it means of course the pit crews are incentivized to work a little bit harder and make sure they nail it for each of their respective drivers. So it's going to be interesting to see how the UKSimRacing inter-team rivalries go as the season commences. But of course they'll be doing everything they can to have a great season from start to finish. But as we see Ren make his way up towards turn number 3 onto the brakes very shortly is the Briton. We also do look to what is Thomas Asfalg. As we can see here, the debutant in the AMP class, currently the fastest of the AMPs on a 30.127. And of course we can't read too much into these practice times in the early stages of the season. These are more place markers for what we could expect in qualifying. Qualifying is the true indicator of pace. Practice here, we don't know, for example, if drivers are running the qualifying setups right now and whether they're running medium, low or high fuel or somewhere in between, or are they running their race setups and doing a final race day simulation. That's all got to be played for. But if we take things at the proverbial word, then Asfalg right now looking quite strong, albeit he does have Mark Johnson not too far behind. And Mark Johnson, of course, a name that you need to keep an eye on in the AMP class, number 44 driver representing UKSimRacing Moss. And the reason for that is he is one of the fastest drivers there in the AMP class. We've seen in previous seasons. Had a very difficult season 9, ended up in a lot of incidents that were not necessarily his fault. But the key thing was he found himself spending a lot of time in the pit lane, and therefore he lost out dearly when there could have been big points on the table. Of course, with a faster pair now available to our drivers in each of the races, it may work to his benefit, given the fact that if incidents do occur, it's not all over. But I can tell you one thing that is over. This practice session, we head into qualifying, and we begin with the open qualifying format for this season. It's the AMs who will take to the field first. Now, as our AM drivers get set, of course, race control will release them in order of classification. So it will be the AMs, and then we'll be seeing what is the pros, and then the elites head on out there. But we are just waiting for a brief moment here. I do believe a couple of drivers just getting themselves into their pit boxes. And well, with this extended qualifying session, we can reassure you it's not going to last the full hour and 15 minutes. But that time has been put there in order to enable qualifying to proceed at a gradual pace. And again, as we said, because it's the first time that we are using this qualifying format, expect things may take a little bit of time to transition, but indeed we're just doing it for the safety of the drivers and make sure to say that everything is proceeding swimmingly. But meanwhile, as we see our drivers queuing up at the end of the pit lane, everybody getting set here, and will we jump on board with a newcomer from Racing Lab and one of Simon Andre Livingston as the Norwegian gets set to go. He's there at the end of the pit lane. He's going to be the first man to take to the circuit and begin to put in the first outlap of the season. And well, we've got our pros line up in their pit boxes as well, and the elites deciding to stay in because of course the elites come at the end of this session. And Livingston is gradually released up to his box. Well, in fact, he's not released just yet, and now he's been given the green light. He can start to make his way out onto the circuit in the Ferrari 488 GT3 Evo. But he heads on out here, of course, in the position of the driver. Gets it wrong there straight away into turn 1, albeit in the pit lane turn 1. And for Livingston, that's not the way you want to start the season whatsoever. But that is not a moment that he's going to be too pleased about. As meanwhile, we do look to other drivers out of the circuit, and that is Satina Dienster as he makes his way up towards turn 3, representing UKSimRacing as he heads up the hill. As I'm hearing they're doing a little bit of work to Livingston's car down the pit lane. Well, right now all of our drivers will be making their way on around here thinking, okay, they've seen what's happened into the pit lane exit at turn 1. They want that to happen again. And remember, there's only 10 minutes available to our AM drivers before they will be required to come into the pit after finishing their qualifying laps. They don't have long, and with the lap time here being approximately 1.5 minutes, if you round it up to an average, that does mean for our drivers here they will be having 4 to 5 fast laps, and that's their lot. As we say hello to BRM Sim Racing there in the YouTube chat. Hope you're doing well at BRM. And indeed, we do look to Thomas Barjac as he makes his way down in the Cookie Monster machine. And, well, of course, the livery there may bring a smile to your face, but the driver himself can also bring a smile to your face. And the number 14 driver, Barjac, really has been one of those drivers who has battled hard in the M class over the last couple of seasons. Could this be the season where he ends up taking the title? Of course, we have not seen the return in the M class of the man who dominated up front last season, and that of course was Aaron McGregor. When he was on a roll, he was absolutely unstoppable. It will be a new name who takes the AM title for this season, but who will it be? As we see Barjac make his way up towards turn number 1, and of course we'll ride on board with one of our drivers once they put in an initial flying lap in order to see them when they've got the tyres up to temperature, and it does take some time to get that tyre temperature into effect. As we look to John Woolridge making his way down through turn 6 into 7, and the Audi R8 is going to be an interesting pick here. It should be very strong in the latter half of the lap, with less of a focus on straight line speed and more of a focus on rotation and ability to maintain speed for medium speed apexes. As Woolridge makes his way down towards turn number 9, we'll hear the sole Audi in class unless I'm mistaken, and therefore he is picking a bit of a unicorn. Currently the Audi not that popular here today, and will understandably, given the fact that I think some drivers will be betting on the benefits of picking another car than the Audi, and the Audi may be a little bit stronger going deeper into the season. As he makes his way up towards turn at number 1 here, Woolridge starting to make his way on to his first flying lap. And meanwhile, some drivers have yet to complete their first flying lap and are already halfway through it. We can see the old dudes in cars driver here of Daniel Pays. Of course, Pays returning and putting in some very strong performances in season 9, but again, belittled a bit by bad luck in terms of those performances, undermined, and therefore not quite able to take the fight to what was that runner-up spot in the end. But instead, Pays now looking ahead to what lies in this season as he makes his way into turns 9 and 10, coming on down. And we say hello there to also Honez Racing, who says good evening all with a winky face. And we can also see then Nathan Foster saying good luck all. And I do believe that we may have another member of the UK Sim Racing team taking over the UK Sim Racing YouTube account, and I believe that is Chris Eddersford, who says I'm here from 12,000 metres up in the sky. Indeed, Mr. Eddersford right now on a flight to somewhere elsewhere in the world. But how are you doing, Chris? I hope you're doing well, and encouraging everyone to hit the like button. Indeed, if you're not subscribed to the UK Sim Racing YouTube channel, then definitely do so, for the simple reason that if you don't subscribe, then you're not able to keep up to date with all the latest broadcasts that are upcoming, and we have got plenty ahead over the course of 2023. But meanwhile, as we look to Matt Edmondson as he comes to the timeline, we jump on board with the AM drivers. He puts in his first line lap of the season and goes on to another. So making his way up towards turn at number 1 here, looking to his left hand side for his brake marker and braking just before the 100 metre board, down to second gear as he keeps the car nicely composed there through the opening corner, and now powering up through the gearbox towards turn at number 3. Now here it's completely flat out for the kink of 2, heading up towards 5th gear once again. Won't be touching 6th gear here, most cars will stay in 5th, but as he heads up, he'll get ready to brake, and braking out the 100 metre board, braking as late as he can, down to first, attacking the gearbox, and just nails the apex there. Almost an element of understeer creeping in, but he hits it spot on, and as he makes his way down towards turn 4, again it's all about returning to full throttle as soon as possible and getting on the headway towards the next braking zone. Downhill here, he'll be braking at 125 metres, coming down from 5th gear to 2nd to 1st. As he clicks the apex curve, gets back on the power, make sure to straighten out the steering wheel and not go too wide there to pick up the gravel. And as he comes through turn number 5, up towards 6, and here looking to his 50 metre board, braking on the right hand side, down to 3rd gear. You can notice they're trying to make a late apex, goes a little bit wide of the apex curve. That'll cost him about a 10th in the run to the next corner at turn 7, but here he lines it up nicely. 3rd gear, clip the apex with 2 left hand wheels, and then use that to rotate the car before straight line onto turn 8's apex. Now heading up towards turn number 9, powering on down here and getting ready to brake into the off-ring corner, braking at about 65 metres from corner apex. The late still goes 55 metres, but he carries a bit too much speed and runs wide. He's still going to finish the lap, but it's upset the momentum of the car, and he goes wide at A1 ring corner as well, and therefore that will be an invalidated lap. And Edmondson, well, it was mostly a good lap until the very end, but giving us a good reference marker there, and still plenty more to go in this session as he goes on to another lap. We're making its way up towards turn at number 1. Meanwhile, we look to a driver who's yet to get a lap on the board, and that is John Woolridge as he makes his way across the grass there and returns. I think run a bit wide coming out of turn number 8, perhaps some damage on the car. I think it may be a visit to the pit lane here, and could it be for the number 80 driver that he's going to be starting from the back of the M class? I'm not sure if he'll get a lap on the board at this rate. He's going to have to work it rapidly, but meanwhile, the fastest man out there in the M class on a 30.394 and looking to still improve, it's none other than Thomas Asfalg as he makes his way down towards turn 4, and well, the number 26 driver here absolutely nailing it. Now, of course, if you're wondering how can you tell who's in which class, well, you can see on the timing tower we do have colour sashes against each driver's name, whereby those with the green are AMs, those with the blue are pros, and those with the yellowy orange are elites. And you'll see those on the car as well, mirrored in terms of the driver's banners and also in terms of their door number cards. And therefore, that's how you keep track of who's who. And whilst the drivers do not really need to battle one another across classes because they're gaining points based on class finishing positions, at the same time, overall finishing position can be very critical, particularly if you're a pro and you want to put one over your elite class peers with a little bit of pride on the line. You never know. We have seen that, of course, in the past. But meanwhile, we've got a number of our AM drives into the pit lane already. Meanwhile, Edmondson's still out as he makes his way through turn at number 9, and he peels into the pit lane as well. I wonder here whether we're potentially seeing the transition over to the next qualifying session, which if so, well, it might be a little bit early here based on the timings we have, but to be fair, I think all the drivers have been given the window to operate, and therefore it does look as though it is the end of the qualifying session, and it is Thomas Asfalk who has taken that AM pole position when all is said and done. I think the qualifying session 8 minutes rather than 10 on the card, and we'll get that corrected for the next round. But the key thing is Thomas Asfalk taking that pole by what was 7.5 hundredths in the end over Mark Johnson. Ferrari versus Mercedes, and it is the Ferrari that has struck the first blow. But now we take a brief breather, of course, before we head into the second part of the qualifying session, and that will be the pro class who start to make their way out of the pit lane. And where we do see Matt Strand parked up there, one of a number of pros getting ready to go. Everybody itching here to make their way out onto the circuit. But of course, there is that brief cool down period in order to give our drivers all the time to go. Essentially, they'll be counted down by race control, and race control having to work hard here to make sure this gets done right. But we are having drivers already leave the pit lane, and that does include Peter Cox, who's made his way out and heading on up very shortly. In fact, they've been called to the end of the pit lane here, so they are going to be gradually making their way out. And as we jump on board with Peter Cox from UKSimRacing Moss, of course the team name in reference to Sir Sterling Moss, and there is another UKSimRacing team competing in this, named after, of course, the legendary James Hunt. Legendary for a number of reasons, some of which are a bit too adult for us to say on this broadcast, but indeed, particularly with his description of what is the breakfast of champions. But Peter Cox waited to go here, and of course, runner-up in the pro class last season. He'll be looking this season to go one step further and take the crown as he makes his way out of the pit lane and up towards turn number 1. Well, of course, here, everybody looking to get it right, going through this right-hander after the incident for Livingston at the restart. But of course, a little bit of enthusiasm should never be dissuaded from a driver, and therefore I think Livingston having to just turn things around in short order. As we do continue to run on board with Cox here, of course he will have that Goliath task now, or that expectation on him that he is the name who is the favourite to take the pro title this season. But of course we're only at the very first steps. Will he be able to do so as the season goes on, or will he find another name that could potentially take the fight to him? Could we potentially see the likes of James Rankin, for example, creep into that fight early on, running the BMW M4 today? And the M4, a very popular choice outside of the Mercedes, and the M4 really offering a lot of everything. The only thing it's not great about is its braking, really. It's one of the weaker cars in terms of its braking potential, particularly from high speed, saying excess of 150 miles an hour. Those brakes do take quite a bit of work compared to some of the other cars, but beyond that, it is a very solid choice. And of course, this being an open setup series, our drivers are bringing the setups they're choosing to their cars, as we see right now Rankin making his way down towards turn at number 7, and Nathan Scott, another name to watch out for, running in the Empire Motorsport Porsche 911 GT3R. And the thing about Scott in particular is he has had some interesting results. In season 9, he was there in the battles for the podium places, but this season, we're hearing down the paddock, he really is looking on form and on fire. He's bringing the Porsche here, an interesting choice. We're not expecting the Porsche to be overly strong. It will do very well under braking into turns 3 and 4, but it will do much better in the latter half of the lap. But can Nathan Scott potentially pull off a surprise and be the guy in effectively the slower top-end speed car, albeit open setup mitigating that somewhat, but can he potentially pull some surprises on the faster straight line beast? As he makes his way up towards turn at number 1, we do see Murray Luca there saying have a good race. Oh, we also say hello there to Mrs. Ray 85, who is cheering on Billy Bob Ray. And of course, Billy Bob Ray back in full force for this season, competing in every round, or the majority of the rounds. You saw him creep onto the grid towards the end. In fact, he was in the YouTube chat, I should say. I think they're mistaking him a little bit with Cole McGurk. Two big names who are returning for this season. More on Cole McGurk shortly, but it's great to see Billy Bob Ray returning to the series, and as he makes one through representing Empire Motorsport this season. And those those colours, I must say, that BMW M4, the blue into black with the white primary theme really does suit the car. And well, I think there, if I'm not mistaken, he is from Scotland, and that may also be a little bit of a nod to his national flag's colours with the blue and white. But as he makes his way through turn 7 into 8 here, he'll be getting himself set up very shortly for his first flying lap of the season. And we also do see there the bad game was saying, well, that could have gone better. First lap invalid, second lap snap oversteer. Oh, well, in the rear with some idea, I suppose. And indeed, qualifying is just one part of the day, and we're expecting here that it's going to be a lot more about the race, because track position is not too critical when there's plenty of overtaking opportunities on offer over the course of a given lap at the Red Bull Ring. But as we do hear that right now, drivers are putting those first laps on the ball. Ray there goes, provisional pole, will be only 3 pro laps on. We're 29.984 and making his way up towards turn number 3. Well, the key thing about the lap here in particular at the Red Bull Ring is that straight line speed acceleration, and also return to full throttle as soon as possible. There are so many corners around here where 1 to 2 miles now makes such a difference in the run to the next corner or the next corner sequence, and that is the aim of the game here. And slipstream draft will also be quite pivotal in qualifying. It can gain you a couple of attempts in the long haul over the lap, but meanwhile we look to Brandon Hay as he heads up the road, and as he heads up towards turn number 3 at the moment, the MBE driver, of course his team name abbreviated to MBE or Newbridge Esports, as he heads into the right hand of turn number 4, or turn number 3 there, getting the numbering right, and as he heads down towards 4, he's looking P4 at the moment. It's quite close at the front of the field at the moment. Nathan Scott P2, and Peter Cox only a further 0.08 of in P3. In fact, a tenth off, we should say. They're correcting ourselves. The top 3 separated by only 1.5 tenths. It is looking very close in the pro class, and can Hay potentially squeeze his way in there? Now, for those wondering in terms of how the grid is set for the race, are we expecting the classes to be divided up so the elites will start ahead of the pros and then the pros will start ahead of the yams? Well, no, we will have an intermingled grid, and indeed, if we show you the standings so far in terms of the overall standings, of course, the elites yet to put in their qualifying laps, but this is how the drivers would line up currently if qualifying was to end suddenly, and you would see this intermingling of the pros and the yams. That's why qualifying is so critical when you are in a given driver class, because you want to not just out-qualify your peers, but particularly in the AM and the pro class, you want to try and put some other class drivers between you and your closest rivals. It gives you a buffer on the opening laps, and you can use that buffer to your advantage, and that's what Brandon Hay will be aware of right now. He'll know that he's a little bit slower than Asphalt, who is the AM pole sitter, and then he'll be looking to try and improve his lap in order to jump in to that medley of Scott, Ray and Cox, as we see that Nathan Scott has improved further. Billy Bob Ray stays P2 and Peter Cox then P3, but Scott putting 2.5 tenths between himself and his contemporaries right now as we return to the class standings. And as we can see, Hay make his way up towards 3. Well, meanwhile, we look to what is Ollie Pimley as he makes his way onwards. And Ollie Pimley in the Symphony Esports black machine, powering his way up the hill currently. In fact, coming to a dead stop there. And I think deciding enough's enough. As meanwhile, we have, what is there, James Rankin heading up the hill. And Rankin, well, he's going to finish off this lap before he's all said and done. And will he be able to find a way to improve it a little bit further? That will be the challenge. But coming through the right-hander of turn number 3, a little bit of a wobble there, interestingly enough. And he is on a personal best as we just update the overlay there with a little bit more driver information. And as he comes down towards turn number 4, well, can he continue this set of personal best sectors, breaking his way down into the right-hander? And this is where a lot of lap time is made or lost, in terms of you put a small mistake in here at turn 4, you feel it all the way out towards turn 6, and it's very hard to recover lap time from there. And coming down into turn at number 6 now, well, the next sector line is on the exit of 6 and into 7, rolling down the hill, and he's not quite improved there in subsector 2, but what about in sector 3? That's where it's all going to come about now. He has improved in sector 1 quite noticeably compared to his previous best. We're in the Brandon Hay's heading to the timeline. Meanwhile, what's Hay going to do? As I look at my commentary booth window, does he potentially improve from P4? He jumps up to P3, does Brandon Hay, so he leaves it late, but gets the job done. Rankin, meanwhile, coming to the final corner as he heads into A1 corner and on the brakes there, and well, in the end, making a mistake and invalidating his lap, and well, it's not an improvement for what is it, James Rankin. Meanwhile, Brandon Hay very happy with that one and just cooling down now as he heads up the hill towards turn number 3, and I think he'll shortly be creeping his way into the pit lane. But of course, he's got time permitted to him, so therefore he can take a little bit of time to head to the pit box, and that is Nathan Scott on pole in the pro class on a 129.723, with Billy Bob Ray just behind him, and Brandon Hay taking that P3 spot with Peter Cox in P4 in the end. Well, an interesting start. We can see it's a Porsche on pole in the pros, with 3 BMWs behind, and then a mix of Ferrari, BMW and Audi to complete the run. Meanwhile, in the AM class, the pole lap, only 6/10 off of the pro pole lap. So Thomas Asfeld definitely setting a marker and putting himself in amongst some of the pros. And Mark Johnson only at 7.5 hundredths off. So very close in both classes, albeit Nathan Scott giving himself a bit of an edge. But we will now very shortly see the elite class take to the circuit. In fact, I think they're all being called to make their way to their pit stalls. And meanwhile, Brandon Hay, we see here just cooling down as he makes his way through and taking his time. And to be fair, he's got all the time in the world here, and he gives us all the time, and indeed his sponsors all the time on the TV camera at the moment as he makes his way through turns 7 and 8 there. And I think he'll definitely be happy with that qualifying lap and know there's now a little bit more out there in terms of pace in the class, but then also thinking to himself, okay, what do I do from this position? Because he'll be starting a pack of 4 pros, albeit if the elites are not able to clear, then we might see some elite drivers spreading themselves in amongst the 4 pro drivers. But as he heads down there, missing the pit lane entry, and I think this time he will be summoned into the pit lane. He may be told to stop at the circuit and withdraw to the pits. But meanwhile, down in the pit lane, I'm hearing it is starting to get a little bit more intense with a couple of drivers in the pit stalls, including what is Martin Tillin. In fact, we can see Tillin there currently just parked up the Tiki Sport Corpo driver, but I think Hay is on to another lap effectively. Have we got any other elite drivers there? We do have Austin William Campbell, who's just obscured there slightly by the Red Bull billboard, and hopefully we can get a better angle there, and there he is as he gets ready to go. I think Brandon Hay is actually on another qualifying lap here, and we will stay and jump on board with Brandon Hay as he makes his way through turn number 3 and heading down towards 4. We bring the dashboard up, and we're giving it every opportunity here. We are just seeing if there's any clarification from race control. We haven't got anything currently as Hay makes his way down towards turn number 4. Well, we're going to ride on board for this lap and see if he comes in. We're coming out of turn 4. In fact, he has been called in, so he will be making his way into the pits. And therefore, I think a bit of miscommunication in terms of what he was permitted and not permitted to do as he returns to his pit box. But still, that's why it's the season opener, and do expect we'll have little moments like that. But cheeky moments aside, well, now we do have our elite drivers heading to the end of the pit lane. So we have one more portion of the qualifying session to go. And well, Cole McGirt there, the Racing Forces driver, another returnee. Of course, a famous name from previous seasons. You'll have to remember back to season 7 where the Racing Forces driver was competing in earnest and then had to take a break due to personal reasons. But I can tell you one thing, when he told everybody he was going to be on the grid for season 10, well, the smiles down in the paddock could not be greater. Indeed, I'll admit I was very happy to hear the 818 would be returning, but here he is in the Mercedes AMG, and as we jump on board with him currently, well, we're going to be hearing 6.3 litres of V8 absolutely raw in his capable hands as he gets ready to go. And they've been given the green light. It's time to head out on circuit, and it's the final portion of the qualifying session, ladies and gentlemen. The elites head on out, and what can they do in terms of their final qualifying positions? Now, of course, the circuit has been rubbered in as much as it will be, and as we do bring out those weather conditions on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see here that we still do have that 25 degrees ambient and 26 degrees track temperature, and track temperature not really rising too much. I think the breathers between each of the qualifying subsessions, if you will, have been enabling the circuit to cool down a little bit. But as time continues to go on here, well, now all the drivers will know that they'll have the circuit in the best possible condition they can, and therefore they'll have to give it everything to set themselves up for success. And for the elites, it's critical here. They will want to clear the pro and the AM classes in earnest, so that way they can go hunting after one another come lap 1 all the way to the end of the race. But as they break the way on down the hill and in towards turn number 4, well, we do look from Carl McGurk to a couple of our newcomers, and in particular to Philip Schwerker, as we do see him make his way on through in the Porsche 911 GT3R. And could we see him and the other Porsche driver of Nathan Foster pull off some surprises with the Porsche? Of course, taking that surprise pole in the Pro class, will there be even more surprises in store? And of course, the name that everybody will be thinking of right now, Jonathan Hitchin in the number 21 car for Symphony Esports White. Will he be able to return and immediately pull off a pole position in Season 10? Or as he heads up towards the final 2 corners, we're not going to quite ride on board with him, so we previously rode on board with BMW M4 around the circuit. Instead, we will be riding on board with Philip Schwerker as he gets ready to take on the circuit in the Porsche 911. And we'll get to see quite a different lap here in the German handling orientated machine as he comes down towards turns 9 and 10. And of course, giving himself a bit of space to the drivers in front here. He doesn't have long in this qualifying session as he comes down through the right-hander. We're heading in towards turn 10. We jump on board with him, bring out the dashboard in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, and here he goes. Run a bit wide out of the final quarter, but still, he's not going to have a slowdown as he heads up towards turn 1, using all the whip to his advantage. He pounds up into 5th gear, looks to his left for his brake marker. braking there approximately 80 metres from corner apex down to third gear, and immediately putting the throttle back in to stabilise the rear end. You have to do a lot of throttle overlaying in the Porsche to keep that rear end planted with the engine being so close to the rear axle. And as he makes it out to turn 3, straight line in there, almost taking a bit of grasp for the initial king through the kink of 2, and now braking his way down the gearbox out of the 100 metre board, all the way down to first gear. Absolutely nails the apex, back on the throttle immediately. A little bit of power oversteer there and having to straighten the steering wheel. That's going to cost him 2 tenths in the run down towards turn 4. But as he heads all the way down towards the next braking zone, it's been a very aggressive start to lap, and he'll continue that form as he breaks down, braking at 105 metres there from corner apex down to second gear, hitting the apex at 50 miles an hour, coming out using all the whip, and now heading back up through the gearbox, up to third, surely up to fourth gear, and now into turn number 6, and this is Porsche territory now as he comes down to third gear, nice and tight to the apex. He uses that left-hand apex curve in order to rotate the car, lifting up, found his way down towards turn 7. Again, put 2 wheels onto the curve as soon as possible, get back on the throttle, get the car to rotate, and as they make the way through 8 up towards turn 9. Well, right now Schwerker really hustling the car. It's a good looking lap as he makes his way into a Jochen Ring corner and onto the brakes here at the 50 metre board, braking at 55 metres in fact, and carrying all the speed and just keeps it on circuit as he makes his way down through the final corner. This is a very fast lap. What's it going to be? Purple in sector 1. He crosses the timeline, and is it going to be a valid lap? I've got my fingers crossed it is, and it's provisional pole for Philip Schwerker, and what a lap to start off his debut as he makes his way into turn 1 at 29.525. Well, now the lap times are going to continue to trickle on down. Of course, that's the first lap where they've not got the tyres fully up to temperature, but as we can see there, Heckung Gestad at 1.5 tenths off in the Mercedes, and Jacko Taylor a further 10th off then. So it's Schwerker who strikes first blood in the elite class, but there's more time to go in this qualifying session, and he'll be looking to find that time in order to keep one step ahead. But as he makes his way down towards turn number 4, meanwhile we look to Alex Hill, and we can see here the Tiki Supersport driver heading into the right-hander of turn number 9, coming on down the 276 and currently at P6. And of course this elite class, look how competitive it is inside that top 10. 7 tenths separate the 10 drivers. It is absolutely unquestionable. We've got an elite class here where everybody has a point to prove, and as they make the way up towards turn 1 here, well, not many more laps to go. As he comes into the braking zone, does Hill and backs the car off there with a poor run through the corner. Meanwhile, Jonathan Hitchin heading across the timeline. He's gone purple in subsector 2. As he crosses the line, he retakes that pole position at 29.323. It's 2 tenths faster than Schwerker's lap. Here we're thinking that there's a bit more out there as he cools it down and decides now just to creep on around. Meanwhile, can Schwerker find a way to counter-attack here? He's not improved in sector 1. He's improved slightly in sector 2. He hasn't improved in sector 3. And it's not enough. He misses out by what is 12 thousandths on a 29.336. I think we've got some more laps still coming through from our drivers, including Jacko Taylor as he comes to the timeline. Taylor crosses there, and well, what's it going to be? 4 tenths down previously, and he does not improve, or does he? No, it's an invalidated lap, so he'll head on around for another in the Tiki Simsport machine. In fact, goes wide there. I think that's going to be an invalidated lap by default, and therefore he will now be looking to the next one if there's time available for it. But as we look to him parking up there, we also look to some other drivers, including Austin William Campbell, as the Symphony Esports white driver parks it up on the exit of turn number 3. And we also do look to Philip Schwerker, who makes his way on down. We do have Nathan Foster yet to get a time on the board, and well, I think this is going to be critical here, because otherwise he'll be starting on the back row of the grid alongside John Waldridge as they make the way down towards the final corner. Then what can Foster do? Heading to the line in the Porsche, and well, he's got quite a high margin to beat. The lap is going to be, well, it's going to be P11 in the elite class of 30.244, when it's not enough to really put him up there directly, but returns to the pit lane. And now the only driver out on circuit here, and I think more on a cool down lap, is Philip Schwerker as he heads towards turn number 9 very shortly. But as the number 63 driver here just thinks about what he's been able to achieve initially, only 12 thousandths between him and the man who has been the class favourite going into the season. That is a statement in itself, and I think here we could have a very tasty rivalry in the run to turns 1 and 3 on the opening lap, and it's all going to be about who nails the start. But into the pit lane he comes. We do have Austin William Campbell back out on circuit. I think he feels he can get one more lap in here with the time remaining, but heading on up. He's in an esports white driver here, currently P5, and well, of course, last season that he was the only driver who brought the Ford GT to the field, and well, it was absolutely brilliant to see the very rare sight of the Ford GT. But he's decided this season, at least for round number 1, to go to the Mercedes. But part of me is hoping he'd fix the Ford GT for round 3 onwards. albeit, of course, it's going to be his choosing at the end of the day. It was wonderful to see how he's able to try and make a car that's so focused around straight line speed and acceleration alone, really making it as wide as possible from round to round. And Austin William Campbell, of course, a driver who never gives in. He doesn't let the tools in his hands hold him back. He uses them to his utmost. He makes his way down towards turn at number 7 here, and the Mercedes definitely fitting him, it would seem, as he heads towards the end of this current lap. But of course, you see on the timer at the top of your screen there, we are 27 minutes into this qualifying session, and we are practically at the end of it now with the elite drivers having finished their qualifying session. We are just waiting for the conclusion here, which Austin William Campbell is leading us to as he makes his way down into the final corner. And I think they're just giving the car a run out as he heads onto a lap. And, well, will he be told to stop or will he be admitted to continue? We jump on board with Austin William Campbell as he takes us around for a lap in the Mercedes AMG. Breaking down from 144 miles an hour there into turn 1, down to second gear with a very aggressive set of downshifts, but notice how keeping 2 wheels on the white lines enable him to stay within track limits. He powers his way up towards turn at number 3 and just building his way back up through the gearbox here up to 5th, and well, he won't be getting to 6th gear anytime soon. A long 5th gear in the Mercedes AMG as he breaks his way down the 100-meter board, very nicely composed on the brakes. He uses the impact of the apex curve to help rotate the car, and as he makes his way out of turn 3, now down towards turn at number 4 he goes. Albeit not improving in sector 1, but it was an impressive sector 1 all the same at 22.05, and onto the brakes here for turn at number 4. And well, he's got to watch out for that innate understeer. You can see it just creeping a little bit as he tries to rotate the car to the apex. The car just saying no, and Campbell not happy with that and deciding enough's enough as he parks it up, and that is his qualifying session done and dusted. So it was all or nothing there, but that is qualifying complete, ladies and gentlemen. It's Jonathan Hitchin on elite pole and overall pole. It's Nathan Scott on pole position for the pro class, and it's pole position for Thomas Asphalt. And how they line up together as a group in the overall standings, we can see they're Hitchin on pole overall. Meanwhile, Scott P4 putting the best part of what is their 6 pros, in fact 5 pros between him, 5 elites we should say, between himself and his next pro driver, Billy Bob Ray. And then meanwhile, Thomas Asphalt P18 on the grid with David Larson between himself and Mark Johnson. So definitely Nathan Scott has done a lot here today in order to give himself the best possible opportunity going into this race. But is that the way it's going to turn out when we go into the race? Well, let's find out. So as they make the way to the grid for our first race of the season, this is how our drivers line up. On pole position is Jonathan Hitchin for Symphony Esports White, joined on the front row by newcomer and close rival it would seem, Philip Schwerk, who starts P2. On row 2 is Ignium Motorsports Hekon Gustad, who is joined by Nathan Scott, the pro pole sitter for Empire Motorsport B, and then Jacko Taylor for Tiki Simsport starts off our third row, joined by Symphony Esports White's Austin William Campbell. Alex Hill for Tiki Simsport lines up P7, joined by Sam Congreve for Empire Motorsport A, and it's Nick Wren and Billy Bob Ray for Tiki Simsport Copper and Empire Motorsport B who wrap up the top 10. Starting on our 6th row, it's Martin Tillin for Tiki Simsport Copper and Brandon Hay, and then we'll have the pairing behind them on row number 7 of Peter Cox for UKSimRacing Moss, joined by Racing Forces Carl McGurk. Further behind them as we look to the blimp camera, starting on what is our 8th row of the grid, it's Nathan Foster for Empire Motorsport B and Racing Forces Daryl Norquette, with Joe Newman for Empire Motorsport A starting P17, P18 your pole sitter of Racing Lab AMS Thomas Asphalt. Then completing our top 20, David Larson for Symphony Esports White and Mark Johnson for UKSimRacing Moss. They start on your 10th row, and they'll be followed up by the pairing of John Eddowes for Tiki Simsport Kimmy and Daniel Pace for Old Dudes in Cars. On round number 12, it's the pair of Frank Klein for Tiki Simsport Copper and when it's there, Seaman Andre Livingston for Racing Lab AM1. And then on row at number 13, you'll have the pairing of Richard Jones and Darren Sharp as the 2 privateers in the pro class. The privateer theme carries on with Matt Edmondson starting P27 on the 14th row, joined by Matt Maddox for BDM Racing. And as we continue down onto the 15th row, it's Matt Strand for Racing Lab AM, joined by Steiner Sani starting P30 for Racing Lab AM1. Oyvind Breivik for Racing Lab AM and CHR Motorsports James Rankin start on your 16th row, with row 17 going to the pair of Ollie Pinley for Symphony Esports Black and Darren Fellows for BDM Racing, and then James Conley and Marvin Cruz start on your 18th row, and further on down on row at number 19, it's John Dowell for Tiki Simsport Kimmy and CHR Motorsports Paul Robson, with row 20 going to the Tiki Simsport pair of Tiki Simsport Copper, Tiki Simsport Towers, I should say, Simon Hartley, and the Copa driver of what is Satinda Dean Deezer, and then we do have Thomas Barjak P41 and John Woolwich completing the field for Revolution Sim Racing, starting P42. But as we look from the back of the field to the front of it, ladies and gentlemen, we are only moments away from turning the first laps in anger here in racing today, and it is Philip Schwerk who starts on pole, well, not on pole position, it's Jonathan Hitchin starts on pole. But as we look down to the circuit side now, we're only moments away with the safety car up the road, but it'll be peeling off very shortly into the pits, and it's for Jonathan Hitchin to take us away for the first 45 minutes of racing in Season 10 of the UKSimRacing GT3 League. And he goes late in the day, but it's lights out and away we go for a new season of racing, and Jonathan Hitchin attacks as they make the way out towards turn number 1, and notice immediately Heckel Gestad having to go defensive versus Austin William Campbell as they head into the opening corner. William Campbell then makes it free wide for a brief moment as they come on through. He gets the move done versus Gestad, but he lets Schwerk go as they head up the hill towards turns 2 and 3. Now charging all the way up, of course, Hitchin getting that great start, and the field starting to run 2 by 2 as they head into the next heavy braking zone. But William Campbell here still defending, albeit on the outside versus Gestad. Gestad coming back strong after being caught up in the run out of 1, and as everybody makes the way onto the brakes here, we can see the rest of the field now starting to flow on through, and well, it's getting 3 wide further on back as we see the AM drive starting to Constantina in, and further on we've got Darren Fellows up the inside there and Matt Maddox. But as they make the way out now, everybody's made it safely, it would seem, through the opening set of corners. But meanwhile, we look back up to the front of the field, and it's still Heckel Gestad battling side by side with Austin William Campbell as they come out of turn at number 4, but it looks like Gestad's got the move done. In fact, Sam Congreve comes on through as Congreve gains the place there and tries to go round the outside now, and Campbell fights back hard on the inside here as the elite drivers continue to go toe to toe as they come down through turns at 5, at 6 and into 7. As they roll their way through the left hand, everything calms down for a brief moment as they now make the way towards the end of the lap, but multiple drives they're drifted to the gravel, and that's going to cost William Campbell in particular a good amount of time as he heads up towards turn at number 9. Congreve's away with the back from here as they head on to the anchors, but who's going to be bold to look for the move into Jochen Rindt corner? Nobody is the answer as they all settle down and head down into turn at number 10. So after 1 lap, it is Jonathan Hitchin who leads by a margin of 9 tenths of grain over Philip Schwerk in P2. We have Heckel Gestad in P3 as they make the way up the hill, followed by Austin William Campbell P4, Sam Congreve P5, Jacko Taylor P6, and then it's your pro leader of Nathan Scott P7. As you can see him there caught up amongst the elite drivers, and Alex Hill P8 ahead of Billy Bob Ray, your next pro P9, and then Nick Wren P10 with best rest Brandon Hay starting off as he means to continue up to P11 overall, still P3 in the pro class. Meanwhile, we look back to your AM leader here, and that's Thomas Asfalg, who right now is battling with David Lawson for the purposes of P18 overall. Lawson defending here versus Asfalg as he's trying to make more ground. John Eddowes tucked in behind as they make the way onto the brakes, but meanwhile Darren Sharp, there's a bit of an inch, there's a car coming across the road, and oh my good lord, well, if you wait to slide a car between multiple machines, I think that was Darren Fellows. My good lord, Darren Fellows, they're picking the right time to slide on through, and I wonder there if Darren Sharp saw the Mercedes and did a double take and think, did that really just happen? Well, it did, ladies and gentlemen, and thankfully nobody got caught up in the instant other than Fellows himself. Fellows there in a bit of an instant, but we'll find out what exactly happened very shortly. But no safety car deployed so far. Indeed, it has been a relatively calm and serene start to the season as they make the way on down, but as they press on and continue, we look to Mark Johnson. We've got a driver off there in when it's the Racing Forces Mercedes. That's Carl McGuirk, who it's gone very, very wrong for. We're not quite sure what's happened to Carl McGuirk, but as our drivers make the way through turns at 7, 8, up towards 9, well, Johnson here still under pressure from Sharples as he tries to chase after Daniel Pace, but Pace breaking away as they head into turn number 9. The battle for what is P2 in the AM class between Pace and Johnson. They come down the hill into turn 10, a bit of dust being kicked up in the rear, and as they roll their way through the right-hander, I agree with you there, MB Robbins, that was close what happened, but as our drivers make the way up towards the next lap, meanwhile further back we've got James Conley here, and James Conley, one of the favourites in season 9 in the AM class, well, he's trying to make the move here on Deemster as they make the way up towards turn number 1, and well, the newcomers Tinder Deemster right up against perhaps one of the ultimate veterans in the AM class, and well, holding him at bay at the moment as Conley meanwhile made to slow down, and Darren Fellows tries to pick a place back up here. We've got car into the wall in the rear of your picture, and that is a Ferrari going on around, and I believe, unless I'm very much mistaken, that may be the Ferrari of Thomas Barshuk that's just gone into the wall on the exit of turn 1. As they head up the hill, Conley still trying to find his way on through past where it's Fellows, as Fellows has found his momentum, and the Mercedes driver trying to make more ground. Meanwhile, we look up to the front of the field, and it's the Heckel Gestad who's now battling side by side with Philip Schwerker for P2 in the elite class, and Gustad here on the inside as we bring the battle box up in the bottom right hand corner of your screen, and we're making it the move count there. Schwerker, I think, focusing on the longer term picture of this race as they come on through turns 7 and 8 and not pushing too hard in the early stages, and I think being mindful here of the need to save some fuel and also preserve the tyres. The Porsche can be the most extreme on tyre wear if it's not managed, but of course he'll be aware of that, having picked the car and gone for a much different car compared to what everybody perhaps would have expected. But as they come down towards turn at number 10, well, Heckle Gustad right now comes back up into P2 and going hunting after Jonathan Hitchin. Indeed, they don't want him to break away if at all, if possible, but Hitchin putting in purple lap after purple lap so far, as meanwhile we're hearing that Thomas Asfalg has come into the pit lane from the lead of the AM class, and well, that is a very early pit stop for the AM driver, and I wonder what exactly has gone wrong there, or whether he's trying an ultimate undercut. But I think the pit stops are going to be for the undercut somewhere in the region of about 14 to 18 minutes in the race based on our strategic predictor. And meanwhile, as our drivers continue the way up the hill here, we look from the front of the field in the elite class to a little bit further back in what is the pro class, and in particular we look to Peter Cox, who is right now chasing after Nathan Foster. But the big change here in the pro class, as we see that the Racing Forces machine parked off circuit, is that we've had Brandon Hay fall a long way down. He's lost 15 places in recent laps, and he's dropped down to P9 in the pro class, and we'll try and get a replay of what exactly happened to Brandon Hay very shortly. But meanwhile, it has been quite the tense start to this race, and we start off by finding out what exactly triggered off that incident involving Darren Fellows. Well, here's a replay. Well, this was the incident involving Darren Fellows. We saw him make his way between drives, a bit of side-to-side contact there with one of the AM TE SimSport machines, and the contact led him going across, and would you believe it, ladies and gentlemen, literally cutting his way in between the battling into turn 3, and well, that could be one of the very moments of the season right now. Not for the, well, it is for a positive reason here in terms of no damage picked up by anyone other than Fellows having some bruised tyres, but they're just fitting himself through the gap like a jigsaw piece. But meanwhile, we also look back to what happened to Cole McGurk on the lap number 2, and this was as he made his way through turn 5 up into 6, side by side battling with one of the Empire Motorsport machines and losing the rear of the car, and in the end drifting the car sideways, and he tried to bring it back together, contact with all the cars coming on through, and we didn't really have anywhere to go, and in the end ended up in the medley, and I think Mark Johnson ended up a bit of a victim of that one. And then we also had the incident as Cole McGurk had to be taken to the pits afterwards. What happened to Brandon Hay on lap number 3? Well, he was running at the time in P3 in the Pro Class, and contact there with one of the elite drivers. He turned into turn 6, and the two of them coming together. We're not quite sure which of the TE SimSport machines that was. We can't make the door number out, but Brandon Hay involved in having to park up and wait. Well, 3 major incidents there early on, as we also saw a driver getting it wrong coming on through the aftermath of what happened to Brandon Hay. But meanwhile, we return to your live pictures, and this is Pete Cox continuing to chase after Nathan Foster. But meanwhile, we look from him to a little bit further down the order, and in particular to Richard Jones. Oh my good lord, and we've got a car going sideways across the road. That was Brandon Hay as the cameras briefly transitioned over. We're not quite sure what's happened there, but we look away for a brief moment and even more unfolds. But definitely right now, it looks like some drivers started to get testy after the first couple of laps of this race, and I do wonder whether we're going to see our first potential safety car of the season, albeit nothing at the moment. We'll keep you posted if it does happen. In fact, we do have a safety car, ladies and gentlemen. One has been deployed, and well, it is in response to the incident that has just occurred. And we'll see the first safety car procedure in effect, and that is where I think our drivers will be allowed to race up to the safety car, and then they'll be required to slow down to the start-finish straight. And Jonathan Hitchin here will find that the race has been neutralised, and all the gap that he was able to open up has now been whittled away. And well, of course, he won't know what exactly caused it. He will just know the simple thing that it's going to cost him very dear. But I think given the way he's managed this race so far, he'll feel as though he can potentially make the jump once again. But in terms of what triggered off the safety car, we are just awaiting confirmation of the instant that set off proceedings. In fact, we do have a replay coming up, and I think it involves Oyvind Breivik. Coming into turn number 3, an on-corner exit. 2 cars already around, Brandon Hay and another driver, and that's what set it off. And Breivik doing everything in his power to find a way to stop the car, to find a way clear. And I think in the end, the drivers in front of him, or in fact behind him, wanted to go on through, and almost getting a little bit of a nudge into the instant had already kicked off. I think we could see a little bit earlier in the instant. This is Paul Robson's perspective as he made his way around. In fact, Paul Robson there ended up being collected by Brandon Hay's wayward car, but in the end, it was another machine that started it. I think James Rankin may have been in there. We jumped on board with James Rankin, the CHR Motorsport driver. What happened from the 67 car's perspective? came out the corner, oh goodness me, and just dropping it on the exit curb there. The rear left tyre spinning up on the yellow raised curb, and that's what led him going round. And in the end, we're just seeing everybody coming on through it and thinking, right, it's happened, and that is what triggered it all off effectively. Rankin getting it slightly wrong, and then everybody else coming into the aftermath, and unfortunate there, but Brandon Hay definitely having, after a good run in qualifying, and also a good start to his race, having a lot of bad luck, and right now dropping a long way down, but neither number of drivers caught up there, and that is why the safety car was called, and I definitely think justified there, given the fact they did collect quite a few drivers that instant. But as we get ready to go again, well, we are still behind the safety car at the moment, and we are just waiting patiently to see when we will go racing once more. And well, as we see Jonathan Hitchin making his way on through at turn number 8 at the moment, definitely not at the pace he wants to, but where does the safety car here really mix things up, I hear you ask? Well, the problem is these sprint races, 45 minutes in nature, they're very short races, and so our drivers normally run with a very limited amount of fuel. Of course, we have that 45% fuel tank that our drivers are permitted to take a maximum of going into the race, and of course they can only refuel up to 45% of the tank. But the thing here is, with those stints being quite limited, of course drivers will be looking to do stints of upwards to the region of 35 minutes before we normally see the pit stops. Therefore, it all comes down to, did they fuel in prediction of a safety car? Did they decide to take as much fuel as possible and not think a safety car was going to occur? And therefore this is an opportunity for drivers to of course save some fuel. They're not aggressively accelerating up through the gearbox, they're running a low gear, they're keeping the revs low or the RPM low on the car, and therefore they can potentially extend now their opening stint to this race. And of course with regards to going into the pit, well, we're going to see some drivers coming in when the pit lane is open. It closes when the safety car starts, and then it reopens at a certain defined point, all being controlled by race control. But it definitely has been a neutralization of the race as all our drivers just proceed on around here. Of course, we'll know when we're going racing once again. We'll see those safety car lights switch off, and that'll be on the second half of the lap. But in the meantime, whilst we are waiting for that safety car to go on in, let's give you a quick recap of the positions in each of the classes, where it's Jonathan Hitchin who leads the elite class ahead of Hekon Gustad with Philip Schwerker P3, ahead of Sam Congreve and Jacko Taylor. They are also your top 5 overall. And then we do have in that group in Alex Hill, but he is separated from his peers by this man, Nathan Scott, the Empire Motorsport B Pro driver, who is your pro leader at this time. Alex Hill's behind, and then Billy Bob Ray, the next pro driver, fits into the pecking order in what is P8 overall, ahead of Nathan Voss, the elite driver, and then Peter Cox completes the top 10 in the pro class, P3 in the class. Meanwhile, as we see here, all our drivers now making their way into double file formation. I think the safety car is being called in at the end of this lap, ladies and gentlemen, so we'll have to suspend the recall of the entire order. But in all this, Daniel Pays is now your AM leader with that unexpected pit stop for Thomas Asphalt. He decided to come on in. I think Daniel Pays really picking up where everybody's left off, and well, Mark Johnson just behind him in the AM class, and then they do have Darryl Norkett, David Larson, Darren Sharples between them before you get to the next AM driver, Matt Maddox. So this is definitely really throwing a span in the works for a good number of AM drives, positively and negatively. But meanwhile, we look back to the front of the field, and you can see already Hitchin backing off the safety car and deciding to wait as he makes his way in towards turn at number 7 and trying to give himself as much breathing room as he heads up towards turns 9 and 10. He'll want to go as soon as possible, nice and early, but indeed we will clear the safety car deployed message there, because the safety car will be coming in very soon, and we'll be going racing once again. Dashboard in the bottom right hand corner of your screen so you can follow Jonathan Hitchin's speed at this point, and when will he decide to go for the restart. We still will have approximately what will be 32 minutes of racing to go. Still the stakes are high here at the Red Bull Ring, and Jonathan Hitchin will take us away very shortly. Goes late, and he goes again, much like the race start, and we're green flag racing once more as Hitchin makes his way up towards turn at number 1. And as he does, look at Philip Schwerker. Meanwhile, Schwerker trying to come back as they make their way into the right-hander. They're side by side between himself and Gustad, but Gustad carries all the momentum on around. Meanwhile, as they make their way up the hill, you can see further back Nathan Scott in a two-way battle, almost in fact not in two-way battle with Billy Bob Ray, but Billy Bob Ray trying to pick his way past Alex Hill and the pro driver versus the elite as they make their way on up towards the braking zone. But meanwhile, in the foreground of the camera, Sam Congreve under pressure from Jacko Taylor. Taylor on the inside, the Tiki Supersport driver going for it, and the Empire Motorsport A driver still there as the two Mercedes drivers make their way down the hill. We can tell you that Billy Bob Ray has found his way past Alex Hill by a sliver, but as they come down the hill here, we focus on the elite battle in the foreground of the camera, and meanwhile Taylor does get it covered off. And And Sam Congreve falling in behind now. Meanwhile, Alex Hill tries to come back at Ray here, but the Tiki Supersport driver can't quite find the run, or can he? In fact, he's on the inside to outside, up towards turn number 6. These two still going, and for Ray, of course, he wants to gain the places as they make their way into the braking zone for turn number 7. But will he be able to hit too wide all the way through? But they run out of space in the end, surely. No, they give one other space, and still Hill's on the outside, Ray on the inside, and eventually one of them's got to back out because look at the speed. They're taking off one of them. They've opened up a gap already in 2 seconds to Nathan Scott up the road. And as they head up towards turn number 9, Nathan Foster on the inside here. He backs it off. He's causing a Constantine to Newman and Tillin behind as they come down towards turn number 10. And meanwhile, into the pit lane goes John Eddowes. Eddowes has jumped up a good number of places in the elite class early on, and he's decided now to come in. I think he's trying to undercut here with the pit stop, and I think it might be a smart move for Eddowes. Get himself some clear track and go hunting once again as they make their way on to another lap. Meanwhile, further down the order, we look to James Rankin, who here finds himself side by side with Doble. And that's John Doble, who's trying to cover the outside as the CHR Motorsport Pro driver looks to cut his way in amongst the AMs. Onto the brakes he goes, and I think it should be straightforward here for Rankin. Of course, now you have the long run up towards turn number 3. We know the BMW absolutely flies out the lower gears, and as he makes his way up the hill, I think he's got it all set and done for this time. But meanwhile, the driver who pitted early, Thomas Asphalt, the Racing Lab AM driver, will now picking his way on around the outside here. Doble defends to the inside, but Asphalt going round on the brakes there and gets it done into turn number 3. Well, it's clockwork manoeuvring there from the number 26 driver, another place game. Meanwhile, speaking of continuing the theme of AM drivers here, we see Sani versus what is Cruz. Cruz behind him as they make their way down to the braking zone, and also just behind them we do have what is there Nick Reynolds. We've got a car around. That's James Conley who's gone wayward, as we can see at the wounded at Sani making its way up towards turn number 6. In fact, that's not Sani with the wounds, that's Matt Strand who's got the wounded Audi. And as they come down to the braking zone here for turn number 6, well, Sani trying to push on. Meanwhile, Cruz falling back with their Ren coming on through. The elite driver picking his way in amongst the two AM drivers, and as they head their way into turn 7 and 8, will Cruz here having to wait to fight another day, as we did see the spin for what was James Conley. We'll try to understand what happened there very shortly, but indeed it's been a fantastic restart to the race, and we're back up to full tempo now as they come to the end of another lap here, and as they make their way on down towards the next one. The big question of pit stops, and will we see anybody else decide to venture into the garages early? Well, we have seen John Eddowes quite recently do it, and of course John Eddowes, the promotee to the elite class, deciding to do something different. Meanwhile, Thomas Barczak here clear of Deanston versus Waldridge, but meanwhile we can see Deanston defending on the outside, Waldridge on the inside. He's going all the way round here to cover up the position for P10 in the AM class, and he covers it there for Tiki Supersport Cope. But meanwhile, going a little bit wide out to the opening corner, that's Barczak, and I think now we're going to have him further too wide as Deanston tries to gain another place as he heads up the hill. The American absolutely flying here, all stars and stripes the way as he heads up towards turn number 3. Meanwhile, behind him you can see Ivan Breivik trying to gain more places, as we have Waldridge here having to worry about what's coming up behind him at a rate of knots compared to what's in front of us. We've got off there, that's Darryl Norquette who's pointing the wrong way. There's a story to that one, we'll find out about that when we can. But meanwhile, making the way down, the AM class definitely going full fire and hell for leather in their racing. And meanwhile, as we look towards the back of the overall field to the pro class, well, here is Richard Jones versus Brandon Hay as we jump aboard the gearbox here of the two pros who are battling for P6 in their class. Now, Brandon Hay, of course, having all the bad luck early on. He does have quite a support group in the YouTube chat there. We have MB Silver GTR and also MB Roberts there cheering on the MB Privateer behind, and Jones here will feel the pressure building, and Hay, of course, having qualified towards the front of the pro class, will now be trying to pick his way on through. But the challenge here for Jones is, can he hold off one of the faster chargers in the group as they make their way on to the next lap? They've still got plenty of time, and this is where strategy could definitely be a big factor. Does Hay decide, actually, you know what, I need to mix things up? He's yet to take his pit stop. Indeed, these two have yet to pit at all, and therefore as they press on to this lap through turn 1 they go, well, Hayes going to have to make a move soon, because otherwise if he spends another 10 minutes stuck behind Jones, he may find himself ended up losing out versus the likes of Cox and Larson, who are a good portion up the road at P3 and P4 of the class respectively. But heading on up the hill towards turn number 3, it looks as though the battle subsided for a brief moment. Meanwhile, a little bit further up the road by comparison, we do look to Peter Cox here as he heads in towards turn number 4 shortly. He does have David Larson 1.5 seconds behind him, but Cox does look very happy with the car. The UKSimRacing Sterling Moss driver just heading down towards the braking zone in a very different livery for this season. But as he makes his way out to the right-hander, with Larson, of course, the Ghostbusters machine for Pacific Esports White, always in the 306 car. You can tell which car it is that's Larson's because of the livery. And as he makes his way through turn number 6, he's not fighting the ghost at the moment. He's instead fighting Mark Johnson, the second place AM driver, who's trying to pick his way through and wants to go hunting after Daniel Pace, who is 5 seconds up the road. But as they come out to turn number 7 and 8 and up towards 9, Johnson here, definitely a fast driver, but can he find his way past the defensive masterclass of David Larson, where he's going to be the unstoppable force meets the immovable object, and which one will reign supreme? But as they head in towards the next lap, meanwhile, we look further back and we can see here R2's early pit stop, and again, we're not quite sure the reasoning behind it for the Racing Lab AM driver, whether it was essentially to take on a little bit of fuel. We did have a stationary time of 6 seconds, but Thomas Asfalk here, the Racing Lab AM Ferrari driver, trying to make his way past what is James Rankin to gain another overall position and continue to gain time as he makes his way up towards turn number 1. But charging on through, we look back to our lead drivers, and now we look to Nathan Foster versus Martin Tilley. That's Tilley on the right of your picture, Foster on the left of your picture. Into turn 3 they go, and Tilley goes a little bit deep. Of course, he'll have a longer run down towards turn number 4, but Nathan Foster will use the low-speed acceleration of the Porsche to give himself a little bit of headwind, but immediately Tilley coming on back. You can see here the gap 2 tenths as they make the way on down. Tilley thinks about it, but he's not close enough to go, and that Porsche absolutely unbeatable on the brakes as they come through the right-hander at turn 4 and up towards 5-6. But as coming on through here, Nathan Foster definitely finding himself now in close quarters company. Joe Newman just 1.6 seconds up the road, and the 52 Porsche fighting on here. Then by Motorsport B with the MP Motorsport A teammate just up the road, also putting pressure on Billy Bob Ray. But coming on through at what is their turns of 7 and 8 and making his way up towards turn number 9 very shortly. Meanwhile, we do look from them to what is up the road, your race leader, Jonathan Hitchen. The Hitchen caught him behind Frank Klein, who is a lap down effectively as he makes his way onto the next lap. Klein involved in one of the early incidents, and Heckel Gustav 1.3 seconds behind as they make their way into turn 1. Well, Gustav has not been able to break away from Schwerker. That's the key thing here, in the fact that with the run of form right now, it does look as though we have a very close two-way battle for that P2 position, and Hitchin is being allowed to control the race a little bit up front, albeit all 3 drivers will be working the car to 100%, but as they head up towards the right-hander at turn 3, you can also see there Jacko Taylor and Sam Coggreve not too far off, but Klein here finding himself in an absolutely nightmare position, which is the fact he's got a lead trying to pick the way on through. Blue flags being waved, of course, and Klein just having to try and steer clear where he can, and he's got plenty of straightway to be able to do that now as he heads down towards turn number 4. But as they head in towards the braking zone here, Congreve clears the lap down car and makes his way through the right-hander. Will Klein right now just staying in the race and wondering if he could potentially benefit from a late safety car. You never know what can happen. Meanwhile, heading down towards turn 4 as well. The throws here of Brandon Hay on the inside of Jones. Jones on the outside onto the anchors. They roll the way through the corner. Jones goes a little bit deep, and the MBE machine of Hay gains another place as Jones falls back there to P7 in the pro class, and Brandon Hay definitely now making haste as he knows that time is running out. But Jones going a little bit deep further, and I wonder if Jones may have just overcut the brakes slightly in battling with Hay, because it looks though there he's just understeering naturally into the corners now. But as he heads through turn with 7 into 8, meanwhile we do look from them to a little bit behind, and here is Ollie Pimley, but he's trying to pick his way past Matt Maddox, the pro driver, trying to gain ground on the AM driver. He's got what is there, Nick Wren behind him, the elite driver. So here we've got 3 classes in the space of 3 cars, and they're all trying to run their own races. But I think the worry for the trio is in terms of where they're going to become the end of their current laps and on to the next ones as they make their way up the hill once again towards turn number 1. And Wren really now looking for this, getting a bit dicey as he looks the inside. Onto the brakes he goes here, and the T6 Corporate driver makes it count. It's a key overall pass. It's not going to gain him any points, but it is going to gain him a little bit more momentum as we hear that John Doble's into the pit lane from what was at the time P5 in the AM class, and decided to take that pit stop at the midway point of the race. Now it does look as though here, with the safety car that's played into effect in this race, everybody taking their stints a bit longer. We expected at least half the field to be looking to pit around now, normally breaking the race into 2 equal halves. It just helps manage that tyre degradation. We're not expecting anybody to change all 4 tyres, but they can change 2 tyres in the pits and take on fuel simultaneously. It works out about the same time with the changes to pitting in iRacing, but meanwhile Dinster not thinking about any of that. All that he's thinking about is making another place and going up the inside there, avoiding the Brivik as he takes on the pro driver, and the AM continuing to blast his way through the field, I should say, as he makes his way down towards the braking zone here of turn number 4. And will he get it done? Will Brivik try to go around the outside? I think Brivik battling this hard is only going to cost him time as he makes his way out the corner. And meanwhile Thomas Asfalk now looking around for a move here as the Racing Lab AM driver will coming up behind one of his fellow team's drivers here, and I think they'll try to swap places as soon as possible for the simple reason Asphalt will be the driver in the AM class who's looking to try and get that class win. But again, that big question mark over that opening pit stop as he comes through turns 7 and 8 and in towards 9 very shortly, but coming up towards that next braking zone, the Jochen Ring curve. All the thing for the number 26 driver at this point is he needs to make the places as soon as possible, because the strategy right now is potentially playing against him the longer he's held up behind the next car. But meanwhile, as we look from them to what is the battle behind Thomas Barjak, will into the pit lane comes John Waldridge from what was at the time P8 in the AM class, and he'll drop down there as he hits the rev limiter line for the pit entry. And as he comes on down, meanwhile, we look back to the two AM drivers here battling of Livingston versus Barjak as they head up towards turn number 1. Livingston on the inside for Racing Lab and 1. Simple move, it would seem, but can Barjak come back in the run up towards turn number 3? I don't think so at the moment. Meanwhile, we look a little bit further up the road here between the Racing Lab and drivers of what is Asphalt versus Breivik, and well, you can see here Breivik literally being pushed out of the way left, right and centre, albeit no car contact. That's Darryl Norquette for Racing Forces in the elite class, also wants his way on through, and will John Eddowes right behind him as we jump on board with the previous season's pro champion, and with the Tiki Simsport Gimme driver looking for that potential move, albeit being covered off here by Norquette, and really finding himself working in a little bit of a box at the moment, as meanwhile we can see that Breivik goes a bit deep. Eddowes has to wait, but he's trying to look for this move for P11 in the elite class, and as they power their way through turn 4, 5 and up towards 6, well, the number 70 driver here needs to take it one place at a time, of course racing against some familiar faces, albeit now in his class, and therefore going up an echelon in the field, and he needs to rise to the challenge. We're coming through turn number 7 into 8 at the moment. A little bit of dirty air, they're just creeping in to invoke some understeer, and he drops a little bit of pace versus Norquette as they head up towards the final 2 corners on this lap. But making the way up towards the right-hand return at number 9. Meanwhile, we look back up to the top of the field to the elite drivers here battling for P2. With Jonovic now 2.2 seconds clear. Heckelgestad still under pressure as he heads down towards turn number 4. And will Schwerker the closest he's been for some time as they get ready to break onto what is the 100-meter board there of turn number 4. Both drivers close, but you can see Gestad, the Mercedes driver, staying behind but not close enough to make it count on corner exit as they head up towards turn 6. Rolling the way onto the next braking zone here. I think Schwerker really now trying to make a mistake occur for Gestad because he's staying close. He's getting closer from corner to corner, and this is where you start to play those psychological games, which is you're not close enough to make a pass, but you're close enough to practically be there to reach out and touch the rear wing of your opponent. And in that scenario, the driver ahead of he's spending more time looking in their rear view mirror than at the corners. Well, that's the idea, and that's where that sudden mistake creeps in. Jacko Taylor and Sam Congreve only 6 and 9 tenths behind respectively. They're also in this fight, and as they make their way down through turn 10 onto the next lap, where they continue to head on around, nobody deciding to come into the pit yet. So we say hello in the YouTube chat to Aaron Tressler Motorsport and also to Daz, and as they come up towards turn number 1. Meanwhile, we do look back to the pro drivers of David Larson versus Peter Cox. This is a battle for P3 in the pro class. Frank Klein in front of them, and Klein there being flashed by Peter Cox. I think Cox said to look, thanks for the tow, but I need you to get out of the way because Larson's right here, right now. And as they head in towards turn number 1, well, meanwhile in the AM class, we have got Johnson and Pays into the pit lane looking at my Conte booth winner. You can see that confirmed on the timing tower. But we continue to watch this battle for P3 in the pro class, and will Larson in the draft will pick up a little bit more top end speed. That's what the Ferrari needs. It needs a tow on these straights to really exploit its gearing. Meanwhile, behind them, Darren Sharp was trying to get around Frank Klein, and you can see Brandon Hay, and Hay in contact there with Klein, and Brandon Hay just cannot get a break today in terms of when things happen. They always seem to happen to him, and I think he right now will be feeling much like the infamous footballer of Mario Baratelli. Why is it always me? Well, of course, it's only one round and not all of the season. As meanwhile, UKSimRacing Moss's Peter Cox breaks away from Larson, with Larson going a bit deep out of turn number 4 as they make the way out towards turn 6. Meanwhile, we look from them to back up towards the battle for P2 in the elite class. It is still Heckelgestad ahead of Philip Schwerker, and we can see UKSimRacing there, and I believe that is one of the key members of Ignium Motorsport saying hello and essentially cheering on his teammate as they make their way out of turn 10 and up towards turn number 1. And the roar of the Mercedes stays true here as Philip Schwerker keeping within half a second, but that gap has opened up slightly since the previous time we looked at them. And I think this is testament right now to the two drivers really playing this game of chess, albeit it's a 45-minute match, and they're both thinking about who is going to be the leader and also who is going to have the stronger strategy as they head up the hill. But we're getting ready to break into turn number number 3. More pit stops playing out, but we have definitely seen an elongation of the pit stop window due to that early safety car, and that means now we are seeing only a couple of drivers venture in, including a very interesting one. David Larson has come on in from behind Peter Cox, and therefore has dropped down the order from P4 in the Pro Class to what we believe will be an exit of P9. He's going to give himself a track position, but was it the right call? That's the question, I think, for many, because of the fact he's relinquished position so early. But meanwhile, looking in the AM class, this man, Thomas Asphalt, who decided to pit after only 8 minutes of racing, so before the safety car, he's currently running P3. He's 10 seconds off the class leader. Surely that early pit stop's not going to be enough to get him to the end of the race. If it is, that is going to be a huge gamble and strategy, and I think it was an investment on there being a safety car at some point, and the Racing Lab AM driver may have just pulled this off because he's pulling places back left, right and centre, but surely he's going to have to do a lot of fuel saving before the end of the race. Probably exploit the engine motor. And of course, you may remember some of our drivers in the previous season talking in their post-round interviews about exploiting the engine motor, particularly Daniel Lee, the Ferrari driver that we all knew and loved in the elite class in season 9, definitely making those engine maps work. Well, meanwhile, we have got pit stop season aplenty now for the elite class as Jonathan Hitchens into the pit lane from the lead of this race. Behind him is Heckle Gestad, and also what is there a little bit further back, we have Nathan Scott from the pro lead, Joe Newman the elite driver. But it means that for the first time today, under race conditions, Philip Schwerker is leading this race, albeit Jacko Taylor and Sam Congreve behind, and that is, I believe, Robson, who just pulled into the inside under braking into turn 3. Robson steering clear of the elite leaders as Congreve slices his way round Robson as they make the way up towards turn number 4. But you can see this top 3 in the elite class now all playing out qualifying laps here. They need to react to what is the pit stop of Jonathan Hitchin, and Hitchin, has he bought himself some clear track on circuit? That's the question that many will be wondering, and the short answer is that yes, he has. He's bought himself 5.7 seconds to Darren Sharples in the run between him in P9 and Sharples in P8 overall. But meanwhile, as we see the race leader make his way into turn at number 6, and down the hill he goes with Taylor and Congreve behind the 2 Mercedes drivers here. And I think these two are really igniting a rivalry between them, given the fact they've been very equal on pace and not really able to gain or lose anything on each other. We do look a little bit further back in the classes to what is your AM leader, my apologies, your pro leader of Peter Cox for UKSimRacing Moss, who right now, of course, trying to press on. He's got a 3.6 second gap to Darren Sharples behind, and Peter Cox here playing the long game on strategy and trying to make his way all the way into the very depths of this opening stint to the race, because I think he'll be feeling as though track position is the most key factor, and also trying to outlast the prospect of a safety car coming in again. But as he comes on down there, we've got a car off, and I believe, unless I'm very much mistaken, that is the car Paul Robson going wayward coming out of turn number 9. A spin there for Robson, but meanwhile the pit lane is full of drivers, including Schwerker, Taylor, Hill, Congreve, Foster and Tilling. Meanwhile, where's Jonathan Hitchin? I hear you ask. Well, here is the Civic Esports white driver, and as he makes his way on down, we look to the blimp camera. Where is Philip Schwerker is the big question, I hear you ask. We can see up there, that's one of the Mercedes. Philip Schwerker coming out the pit lane, and Philip Schwerker takes the lead of the race as he comes out of the pit stalls, and up towards turn 3 he flies. He's gained in the pits, and as he makes way up the hill, Peter Cox is leading a lap of this race overall in the pro class. But right now we've had a change of elite lead, and in terms of the station pit stop times, well, Schwerker had 2 seconds less time in the pits compared to Jonathan Hitchin in terms of stationary time, and also he had an extra 2 seconds less in terms of getting to his box and exiting the pit lane. So right now the German is leading, and well, this is a surprise, but can it stay that way for another 13 minutes plus the final lap? And coming down towards turn at number 4, his first task will be to get his way past Frank Klein, who of course running a lap down at this point in the race. He'll be looking to come on through as soon as possible. I think Schwerker will be keen to make this move before they get into the depths at turn 7 and 8, because that is where the Porsche gains so much lap time compared to the BMW. It starts here at turn 6, as we see Klein going a little bit deep. Schwerker's going to look to the inside here. He's not going to really find it, and this is costing him massively, as that gap now is absolutely crashing down as they make the way at 7 and 8 and in towards 9. And getting ready for the braking zone here. Schwerker gaining the speed in the toe of the BMW, but he's losing all the speed through the corners. Of course, Klein not trying to hold him up, just simply waiting for the opportunity to let him go, and that'll be on the exit here at turn number 10. I think Schwerker will be annoyed at the fact that this has not worked out to his endeavours. They make the way to the timing line, and now he'll come out on the inside. He's going to be compromised into turn number 1. This definitely is not the way the number 63 driver wants this to work, and Hitchin meanwhile tucked in behind. Well, Hitchin also finds himself being a little bit obstructed there. I think some frustration for Hitchin, because he's gained and now he's going to lose out just as much. Well, to be fair, Klein being consistent between the pair as they make make the way up towards turn at number 3, and into the braking zone they go. Meanwhile, Heckel Gestad will chasing after Jacko Taylor, and Gestad losing out the most in terms of the pit stops, dropping out of P4 behind Jacko Taylor, with Sam Congreve a further 3.6 seconds behind. Well, it's definitely an odd mix-up at the front of the field in the elite class. We do have some further drama further down the order, including a second pit stop for Thomas Asfau. We can confirm there was that second pit stop in the end that we did expect to occur, given the fact he pitted so early, so he's dropped down. We're also saying that Satinder Dienster has been involved in an incident that has dropped him a long way down to P11 in the AM class. We stay here focused on Heckel Gestad versus Jacko Taylor for now as they come through the left-hander of turn number 6, and well, Gestad having the longest pit stop of the group, 13-second stationary time in terms of the top 5 in the elite class. They give himself some pace. Meanwhile, I think that's Frank Klein who's gone off, and well, we've also had Jonathan Hitchin caught up in the instant. Hitchin's gone off, and therefore he's lost a lot as he makes his way back into circuit. Everyone past the seas around the 21 BMW, and well, what on earth has just happened to Jonathan Hitchin and Frank Klein? Well, here's a replay and we can find out. It's making its way into turn number 7 into 8. Klein lost the rear of the car on corner exit, and Hitchin being collected, and well, Klein immediately to the pits, and for Jonathan Hitchin, I can imagine there might be a few swear words under his virtual visor right now for the simple reason it was looking so good to go hunting after Philip Schwerker, but Schwerker now has been given the ultimate lifeline of the time as he makes his way onto the next lap, and Hitchin also follows through. We return to live pictures, but that is not the way that Hitchin expected it to go. Meanwhile, we look back to the pro class here, and Darren Sharp was still chased after by Brandon Hay in the battle for P5 in the pros. Nathan Scott's your pro at lead ahead of Peter Scott's Ivan Brevik and David Larson, so the top 4 have stayed the same, albeit Nathan Scott's got a gap of 9 seconds now. Darren Sharp was meanwhile continuing to find himself being hotly pursued by the privateer MBE machine. And as they head up the hill, Matt Edmondson staying on the inside there. The Racing Forces try to stay well clear of all the battling and going into the right-hander and turn in number 3 right now. Sharp was in the 777 car, staying close to Wren. I think hoping that Nick Wren will not break away. He will want the slipstream of that Mercedes to just give him a little bit of a buffer on the straights versus the straight line supremacy versus the Ferrari, that is, of course, of Brandon Hayes' BMW. But onto the brakes they go, and with Sharples here, goes a little bit deep, a bit tentative, and I think just worried about that dirty air causing the front end of the car to want to jutter through. And as they head up towards turn 6, you can see Hay now almost within striking distance as we jump on board with the Mercedes, with the BMW driver. But as we mix up the 2 German manufacturers, and he heads his way down towards turn at number 7, the 96 driver here, hot on the heels of his rival. But of course, this is where it really does come down to finding that last 5% to make the move. We're into the final 10 minutes of this race, plus of course the final lap that's added on in terms of time. And Hay here as close as he'll ever be, but he's got to pick the right time to get the move done and not have to worry about the counter attack. And that's the thing about the Red Bull Ring, it's the first half of the lap where all the moves potentially are, but at the same time you also have that risk of being counter-attacked in the run to the next corner. But as they head across the timeline up the hill, and Hay here staying close, doing everything he thinks about it, tries to get into the head of Sharples. Sharples not falling up for it, and of course Darren Sharples, very smart driver in terms of knowing where to place the car. We saw that in season 9 and doing it again, not falling to that trick. And Hay here gets the power out of 1, up towards 3 they go, but 2 tenths is the gap. The tow gradually benefiting him, but I don't think he's going to have it here. He thinks about on the inside, he's going to go all in. He's going to try and poke his nose in, but there you can see Sharples just simply out-braking him. And I think at the end of the day, Hay was hoping that Sharples would open the steering and think, oh goodness, Hay's going for it. But in the end, Sharples just called him out in his bluff and said, well, if we're both going to go to this apex, we're going to have an incident unless you back out. And Brandon Hay in the end will going for it there, but Darren Sharples giving him equal in measure as they make their way through turn number 4. Behind them, Richard Jones about 5 seconds back here, and right now the privateer looking to gain a bit more time with Mark Johnson, your AM leader behind. And Will Johnson, the UKSimRacing Moss, definitely having a race to remember. He's gained places and time as the race has gone on, and he's moved his way into lead since then. He hasn't looked back. Daniel Pace only 1.5 seconds off, with Matt Maddox in P3 as well. And so a good number of drivers have really found their way through the field. Meanwhile, as we look from them to a bit further on, we've got Jonathan Eddowes, we've got John Eddowes into the pit lane. We've also got Ivan Brevik into the pit lane once again. And I wonder whether they potentially hit a track limit breach and therefore they're coming for drive-through penalties, or whether there's going to be some stationary time and they've perhaps not fueled enough to get to the end of the race unscathed. But as Johnson comes down through turn number 10, Meanwhile, we do look to Nathan Foster, and Nathan Foster here battling side by side with Alex Hill. This is in the battle for P6 in the elite class, and as they head on to the brakes here, Foster doing everything right, using the Porsche's braking potential to keep Hill at bay. Hill will of course have the straight line speed in return, but as we can see a flash of lights there from Alex Hill, I think trying to get in the head of his rival, as meanwhile we can see Nathan Scott and Joe Newman just passing the camera shot up ahead, but we can see the return move here from Hill onto the brakes. It's turn 4, the two come together, and well, now that one's going to be for debate in terms of who triggered it off. You would argue that I think Hill came in for a little bit too far back. That's at least Foster's argument. Meanwhile, Hill would argue, well, I had an overlap as we were breaking on in, and I think with that in mind, well, Hill's fallen back now, and Nathan Foster will resume the position P7 in the elite class. But as we look from them to further down the order, battles are plenty, and we can see here, well, goodness me, we've got Simon Hartley at the head of a group, including James Rankin, John Doble, Thomas Asphalt, and also Billy Bob Graves closing up since gradually, along with Matt Edmondson. But the reason for all this, of course, is that Daniel Pay's at the head of the group, P4 in the AM class. He's got Simon Hartley as AMP here just behind. Meanwhile, going in very hot on the brakes there to try and find his way past Hartley is James Rankin, and Hartley goes deep into Supersport Tour, and in return we can see now that Thomas Asphalt has made his way outside and around as they come onto the brakes here for turn number 6, and James Rankin finds himself in the medley of the AMs as a pro driver, and meanwhile the AM driver Thomas Asphalt, the fastest man in qualifying, finds himself in P5 for Racing Lab AM class and still trying to make more time in more headway as we've got a car around, and that's Daniel Paynes who's lost it on the exit at turn number 8, and that is going to be returned to the pits for him. But meanwhile Simon Hartley trying to come back here versus Asphalt coming through turn number 9. It's going to be very nip and tuck. There's further contact between the two of them as they both end up taking one off the circuit, and well, it is getting messy out there at the moment as Asphalt just manages to get the car to slowly come to a stop, and they're almost contact for Livingston coming on through. But I think there a few tempers started to shine, a bit of drivers seeing at red, but Hartley and Asphalt definitely making one another end up in the wars, and therefore as they both return to the circuit, it's not the way they've wanted it to go. But as they head the way on towards the closing stage of this race, meanwhile we look from them back up to the elite drivers, and here Heckel Gestad, you can see in the front of the picture, that is Furco, who's just running off now as much as he can, albeit there is a big question. I've seen a number of you in the YouTube chat asking, did Furco under fuel too much, and particularly with 10.5 seconds stationary time besides the 13.1 second stationary time of Heckel Gestad. That could be a very good point that comes back to haunt our race leader on the final lap or two. Gestad here still being chased by Jacko Taylor, and well, as the top three make the way onto what for them is lap 26 of the race conditions. Nothing between them lap time wise for Ditch Furco on that last lap of 30.5, Heckel Gestad at 29.9, Jacko Taylor at 30.1. So I get the feeling that Furco may be having to save some fuel now. He may have to lift and coast a little bit into each and every corner's heavy braking zone in order to be able to get to the end on fuel, or at least give himself the fuel to go battling at the end. And well, he will not want to lose the lead with only 1 or 2 laps remaining. I can tell you that is the most painful thing when you're almost there to the checkered flag and then you see the lead just walk away off into the distance with only moments to spare. But as the top 3 in the elite class gradually come back together, meanwhile we also look to the battle for what is a P4 in the pro class, and well, quite recently Brandon Hay has found his way past Darren Sharples as they head into turn number 3, Hay in that P4 pro position. But as they come out of the corner and down, they've got Darren Norquette behind him, who's a lap down in the elite class and making the way onwards towards the next heavy braking zone. Well, Sharples there 4.5 tenths off of Brandon Hay, but I think Brandon Hay may be there to stay in P4. Coming off the brakes now and on towards the next power sinks. Hay going a little bit deep there, interesting, but Sharples not really able to capitalise, being a very sensitive approach to the exit of turn number 4, and I think they're worried about now the tyre degradation kicking on those left side tyres. This is a clockwise circuit, and therefore the left side tyres really do take the load compared to the right side tyres. I think for a good number of drivers where they've been pushing hard so early on, that's the thing with these sprint races, they really do test the boundary of the compound in terms of how much life you'll have at the end of it, and Sharples there just trying to protect those tyres for the final couple of laps. Meanwhile, further down the order, I can tell you that we do have a bit of a growing battle between the trio here. It's Maddox, Matt Strand, and also Steiner Sani as they head up towards turn number 9. And well, it's Maddox who's P2 in the AM class ahead of the P7 Pro driver of Strand, with then the P3 AM driver of Sani behind. And with these three coming together, and Edo's also onto the back of this, well, Matt Strand finds himself in a bit of an unenviable position here, which is he may be influencing a battle between the drivers as they head up towards the next lap, because of course being the pro there, he'll want to get out of the way as soon as possible. I can tell you Sani will want him to get out of the way as soon as possible, and Maddox in return will just simply want him to stay there behind. But coming out of turn number 1, we ride on board the gearbox here of Matt Maddox, the VDM Racing driver, who continues to head up the hill. And we're in the number 20 car here, getting ready to head into the braking zone very shortly. Powering his way all the way up towards turn number 3, and onto the brakes he goes through the right-hander, and well, getting it absolutely hooked up. The run's a little bit wide and has to recollect the car through the run wide, and this is going to be an opportunity for Strand to try and pick his way through. The Audi gaining speed here. It takes its time, however. It's the V10 versus the 6-cylinder of the Porsche, and it's going to be Strand up the inside. Onto the brakes they go, and Maddox here not fighting this one too hard. He'll rely on trying to carry the speed around the outside, but in the end he has to back off, and Sani tucking in behind as Maddox loses the place, and now his next rival will be a class rival as they head into turn number 6. Going a little bit deep there again. I think Maddox just slightly perturbed by what's happened, but coming on down the hill, apparently for this podium spot. Also Edo's there creeping into the mix and just watching on. He is in the proverbial popcorn seat position in terms of he's got a full feature of this battle in front of him. But speaking of battles growing, the battle for the elite lead is closing up as well, and they've gone on to their penultimate lap as we're to understand it. Of course, we follow this AM battle to the end of this lap, and we will switch to the elite leaders very shortly. But Maddox here doing everything in his power to hold on to P2 in class, with Johnson almost 10 seconds up the road. But coming out the final quarter, this is going to be the one opportunity that Sani will need as they power their way out towards turn number 1. He's going to peel out to the inside. Maddox holds the outside, albeit off centre, and as they head into the braking zone, it's not going to be perfect. As you can see, Sani down the compromise line, Edos backs off, but as they power their way off the corner, Maddox makes it count. And meanwhile, we look back up to your elite leaders. They have got what is another 40 seconds to go. I think they will complete this lap and have one more at their disposal, and will now, we can see the effects and need to save some fuel coming into the mix as our leader in the number 63, Schwerker, is under pressure from Hector Gestad and Jacko Taylor just behind. Gestad's all over the back of him as we ride on board with the Mercedes AMG Ignium Motorsport driver coming into the final corner, and now it's all one more lap to go. They go on to the 29th lap of asking here in the first race of the season. They power their way out the hill. It's Philip Schwerker who leads ahead of Hector Gestad, with Jacko Taylor behind. Gestad looks immediately for a move into turn 1. He can't quite find it. He backs off here. He knows the run's into turn 3. That's where it all is. They clatter their way over the apex curve of 1. Taylor behind gets the better run off the corner. Schwerker gets a better run off the corner. Gestad's vulnerable. As you can see there in the TV camera in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, that's how close Taylor is. Now will Taylor look for the move. In return, the Mercedes opens up its legs. They go onto the brakes here. It's 3 wide into turn number 3, and Jacko Taylor goes for it. He goes for 1, he goes for 2, and he makes it count. They come through the corner. Gestad gains 1 and turn as well, but he doesn't gain overall position. And as they make their way down towards turn 4, Jacko Taylor's going to cover off his investment as much as he can. He's gone all in here. This is absolutely brilliant stuff. As they come down towards turn number 4, Gestad's on the inside. Taylor comes him off, however. Schwerker's fallen back. He's not got enough fuel to be in this fight. He's going to try and stay for P3. But meanwhile, it's the back of the Mercedes as they make their way up towards turn number 6. Taylor holds the lead, and the TE Supersport driver just has another 5 corners to go. He takes turn 6 there absolutely defensively as he can. You know right now he is literally running on eggshells. One tiny mistake is all it could be to end this opportunity to take the win, and Schwerker's not got enough fuel. Congreve's come on through, so it does mean the Porsche drivers lose out massively, but as Jacko Taylor makes his way out of turn number 8, 2 more corners to go. They're the nastiest corners for track limits. He comes through 9, and as he makes his way down towards turn number 10, it's 1 corner between him and the checkered flag. I think he's done it, ladies and gentlemen. He comes to the line. Jacko Taylor wins in Austria, crossing the line by only 2 tenths ahead of Hector Gestad in the elite and overall categories, and as Sam Congreve who comes home P3 for Empire Motorsport A. Then it'll be Joe Newman P4, and Nathan Scott will take the pro win in the P5 overall in a dominant day today. Shortly it'll be Martin Tillin who comes home P5 in the elite class ahead of Nathan Foster. Alex Hill finished P7 in the elite ahead of Peter Cox, who takes P2 in the pro class there. And then it will be Nick Wren, followed up by David Lawson, who crosses the line on the podium there in the pro class, P3 in class, ahead of Brandon Harron, Darren Sharples and Richard Jones. Mark Johnson crosses the line, your AM winner today for UKSimRacing Moss, 23.6 seconds clear of his AM contemporaries. Philip Schwerker behind him, P16 in the end overall. And it'll be John Edos, who on his debut in the elite class, where it hasn't been a stellar result, but he's brought it home inside the top 10, and that's what matters. Oyvind Brevik behind P18 overall, P7 in the pro class, ahead of what is James Rankin and Billy Bob Ray. And it'll be finally in the AM class, John Doble, who just holds off Matt Maddox to the line for TE Supersport Kimi. He got it done on the final lap, and Mannix completes the AM podium ahead of Simon Andre Livingston, who after a difficult start in qualifying has turned it all around to be inside the top 5 in the AM class. Thomas Asfal P5 in the AM class ahead of what is there, Steinar Sani, and then it's going to be Thomas Barjak, who is P26 overall, but P7 in the AM class. He crosses the line as he comes on down towards the finish line there. It's going to be Satinder Diensto, who finishes P27, overall P8 in the AM class, ahead of Matt Strand, who we've got a little bit of time before he arrives at the end of his race. In fact, I think he's run out of fuel. He's creeping along here, and that's not the way to go. And James Conley will come on through right at the end to gain one more place in the AM class. It's been a difficult race for James Conley, but he'll come on through to complete his one in the end on the same lap as the AM winner. But my goodness, it's been a challenging one for every class as he comes to the timing line there, and I think with that he will be our last finisher on the lead lap unless Matt Strand can find a way. He can't get his way up the hill. The Racing Lab AM car is now rolling its way back down the hill. He will be the last proverbial finisher. He's had to retire the car to the pit lane, and therefore that will drop him a lap. But my goodness, ladies and gentlemen, what a race to the finish. And well, we take a brief breather and give you those race results subject to any stewards' inquiries. Started off then with the overall finishing positions inside the top 10, and also a special mention to the other class podium finishers. Jacko Taylor today taking the overall win for Tiki Supersport by 2.5 tenths at the finish line over Hekon Gustad. The Indian Motorsport driver there taking the fight for the elite all the way down to the very end, but Jacko Taylor with a phenomenal two-way pass into turn 3, making it count on the brakes, and after that Gustad threw everything at it, but it wasn't enough to come on back. Sam Congreve, P3 there for Empire Motorsport A, rounding off the elite and overall podium ahead of teammate Joe Newman. A great showing there for Empire Motorsport in the elite class, and the same for P5 finisher for Empire Motorsport B, Nathan Scott, your pro winner. Martin Tin in P6 for Tiki SimSport Corpa ahead of Nathan Foster for Empire Motorsport B, and then Alex Hill ahead of Peter Cox and Nick Wren to complete the top 10. Special mention, of course, the UKSimRacing Moss driver of Peter Cox, who took second place on the pro podium. And then best the rest in P11, the third place finisher in the pro class, completing the pro podium, David Larson there for Symphony Esports White. We now focus on the other podium finishers, and that's in particular in the AM class. And overall, your AM winner today, P15 overall, Mark Johnson there for UKSimRacing Moss. And as we look further on down the finishing position order, we can see John Dowell there just holding on to P2 come the very end for Tiki Supersport Kimi in the AM class, ahead of Matt Maddox. They were P21 and P22 overall respectively, and the BDM Racing driver 9. There is plenty more to go. And well, he may have missed out on the second spot of the podium, but still he's earned his right to be on that third spot, undoubtedly so. But as then we look down to the bottom of the finishing positions there, ladies and gentlemen, we see a number of drivers finishing a lap down come the end, but we also did have a number of retirements, including what was the retirement of Daniel Pays at P35, 6 laps on the end, Jonathan Hitchin retiring 7 laps on the end at P36, with to understand for Symphony Esports White, Frank Klein 10 laps on the end, and Paul Robson there P38, and I do believe the last of our finishers. In fact, no, we got even more there, apologies. We also did have the retirements of Marvin Cruz, Darren Fellows, Carl McGurk, and Austin William Campbell. But with that, we now, of course, look ahead to the individual class finishing positions, and we start off with the elite class. And we can see here in the elite class, Jacko Taylor taking the win, confirmed by that 2.5 tenth margin over Hekon Gustad, with Sam Congreve P3. Behind the podium finishers, Joe Newman ahead of Martin Tillin, with Nathan Foster there to a P6, and only 2 seconds off of the top 5 come the end. A further 2 seconds to Alex Hill for Tiki SimSport, ahead of Nick Wren, who had a good showing in the midfield of the elite class, and we're looking to continue that for Tiki SimSport Corpa next round. Philip Schwerker, however, the biggest name that fell today outside of Jonathan Hitchin, indeed, not having enough fuel on that final lap, and having to release the positions to a P9 finish of the privateer, and he'll be looking to improve upon that next week, undoubtedly so, with John Eddowes there pushing on for a P10 finish and inside the top 10 on his debut in the elite class for Tiki SimSport Kimi. Best of the rest there in the elite class, Darren Norquette P11 for Racing Forces, finishing a lap down come the finish, and then Jonathan Hitchin, the biggest name to fall, and of course the favourite today, with that unstoppable pace early on, even after the safety car restart, the Symphony Esports White driver with that P12 at 7 laps down come the finish, and then Colm got P13 for Racing Forces with that early retirement, 24 laps on the finish, and Austin William Campbell returned a lap earlier for what was Symphony Esports White. We then come on to the Pro class. And we can see here at the top of the standings, Nathan Scott for Empire Motorsport B, ahead of the UKSimRacing Moss driver Peter Cox and Sivana Esport White's David Larson completing the top three. Outside of the podium places, a great recovery drive from Brandon Hay after everything that happened to him early on in the race. Indeed, he dropped down to what was P9 in the class and had to fight his way back up. Darren Sharp was P5 there, ahead of Richard Jones with Oyvind Breivik, the Racing Lab AM driver, finishing P7, a bit off of the top 6, but still knowing that he was involved in a couple of moments that were not necessarily his fault. Then James Rankin, Billy Bob Ray and Matt Strand to complete the top 10. Finishing a lap down in the end in what was P10 for Matt Strand, and then a further lap down, 2 laps down on the finisher at the head of the field in the pro class was Ollie Pinley for Symphony Esports Black, with CHR Motorsports Paul Robson retiring 11 laps from the end in P12, and BDM Races Darren Fellows retiring 21 laps from the finish in P13. We then come on to the AM class. And we can see here in the AM class, Mark Johnson confirmed winner by 25 seconds. Calm at the checker flag. The UKSimRacing Moss driver definitely starting off with a stellar performance. John Doble, meanwhile, fighting for that second place spot on the AM podium for Tiki Simsport Kimmy, and only ahead of Matt Maddox. In the end, not even in excess of 2 tenths. 1.1 tenths was the gap between the two of them at the finish line. The BDM Racing driver finished ahead of Simon Andre Livingston. And Livingston, of course, with a moment that some will perhaps ridicule him a little bit for after today. And of course, that mistake in qualifying, he won't be forgetting about that anytime soon, but still making himself also count in the AM class of Racing Lab AM1 with a stellar drive to P4, let that be said. And then Thomas Asfalk with that early pit stop, making it 2 pit stops in the end, losing out on what looked to be a favourable day today, but finishing inside the top 5 with a P5 finish for Racing Lab AM. And then as we come on to P6 driver Steinar Sani, the Racing Lab AM1 driver sandwiching his teammate ahead of Thomas Barjak P7 with Satinder Dinsder P8 for Tiki Simsport Kulpa, with a mid-race incident dropping him down from the order at 1 point battle inside the top 5, and then James Connolly and Simon Hartley completing the top 10. And John Rulridge finishing a lap down there in P11, much like Simon Hartley, a lap down, but still the Revolution Sim Racing driver having a good start to his season, ahead of Matt Edmondson, who finished a lap down as well, and then retiring 6 laps from the finish, Daniel Pace for Old Dudes in Cars, ahead of Frank Klein, who retired 10 laps from the finish, and then Marvin Cruz, who completed the standings there with that retirement 17 laps from the final lap. But of course, those are all of our finishing positions, ladies and gentlemen. And with that, we would normally at this point say we'll be back in approximately 10 to 12 minutes for post-round interviews with our drivers. But unfortunately, due to availability this evening, we are going to have to skip the post-round interviews. They will be back in full anger for round number 2. We do apologise for that, because we know that you guys and girls at home do love them. But we'll definitely make sure to get plenty of post-round interviews in next round. And that does mean it is now time for us to wrap up. But before we wrap up, of course, there's a good time to talk about our affiliates. For did you know, at UKSimRacing, we are affiliated with a number of real-world and also sim racing companies. And, well, those companies include Swello Meta Sim Racing Coaching, Race Anywhere, and Demon Tweaks. And if you do head to our website, that's uksimracing.co.uk today, well, you'll see a page that looks much like this. And indeed, whilst there's no affiliates page currently available for you to find out more about our affiliates, we'll talk a little bit more about them in a brief moment. There is a link to our Discord there in the top right corner of the screen. And if you click on that, well, you'll need to be part of our Discord if you ever want to race in any of our series, but also more importantly in relation to our affiliates, you'll be able to go to a page on our Discord where our affiliates do provide some discount codes. Now, why would you want to potentially use those discount codes? Well, it means that you as the consumer can get a discount on your purchase, and we here at UKSimRacing will get a kickback from your purchase. And because we're a non-profit organisation, all of our affiliate earnings shall be invested back into the community to fund future series, including this latest rendition of the GT3 League, and we've got plenty more planned for 2023. Remember, a little purchase can go a long way in supporting UK Sim Racing, and well, we've got a long way to go in this championship, and indeed it has been a thriller today. But with that, it's now time for us to wrap up. Indeed, thank you very much for watching, ladies and gentlemen. And if you do want to know more about the UK Sim Racing community, we just talked a little bit about our website, but you are also available on our Twitter if you'd like to follow us on social media. And that Twitter address is twitter.com/UKSimRacing_. Also, we'd like to say a big thank you to our affiliates now, and let's just tell you a little bit more about each of them. They include Swello Meta Sim Racing Coaching, the creator of the Motor Racing Checklist. Swello Meta's Sim Racing Coaching can help you take your sim racing driving to the next level, whether you're looking to gain a 10th, improve your approach to the racing line, or develop your consistency consistency, Swelio Meta has a coaching course to meet your needs. Plus, with Swelio being a multi-time champion of official iRacing series, including the 2021 PESCC, you know you are receiving coaching for the very best in the industry. We also have Race Anywhere, the provider of curated sim racing equipment aimed to only stock products that represent excellent value for the sim racing community. Also, Demon Tweaks, the provider of the most complete and innovative motorsport product range available worldwide. So no matter what your level or discipline, Demon Tweaks could help drive you to realize your motorsport ambitions in the real world. We also have SimLab, our latest affiliate, the leading manufacturer of higher quality sim racing related hardware. And as a proud member of Mercedes-AMG Petronas Esports, SimLab aims to enhance virtual racing experiences with uncompromising solutions that push the boundaries of esports. And we also lastly have Amazon, the company striving to be the Earth's most customer-centric company, the Earth's best employer, and the Earth's safest place to work through the provision of concepts pioneered by Amazon, including but not limited to Amazon Prime, Amazon Fire tablets, and Amazon Alexa. But as we now look ahead to next time, ladies and gentlemen, well, round one has been a thriller. There's been no question about it. But round number two, we'll see our drivers make the way from Austria to neighbouring Spain for the Jerez circuit, or the Circuito de Jerez Enjonito, and that will be in round number two. We should, of course, point out to you that the broadcast for next week's round will be a post-round broadcast. The racing action will occur live on what will be Sunday, the 9th of April, but we'll be bringing it to you as if it were live on Wednesday, the 12th of April. So adjust your calendars slightly, and I can promise you one thing, ladies and gentlemen, if you've never tuned into a post-round broadcast, it is going to be as close as possible to the real live thing, and indeed, it's not going to be one to miss, because the gauntlet has been laid down today across the classes. In the elite class, it has been an open fire field between many of our drivers, but it was Jacko Taylor who took the first win. In the Pro class, Nathan Scott looked to be in a world of his own in the Porsche 911, and in the AM class, Mark Johnson seemed to dominate, albeit many of his AM drivers ended up in incidents which cost them dear. Will it be the same in round two? We'll find out that and all more in a week's time, but until then, we have been UK Sim Racing. I've been your host and commentator, Paul TX141 Walsh, also known as Britain Spit, depending on what media you follow me on. And until next time, have a great rest of your weekend, and well, we wish you well. Stay safe, stay positive and stay smiling, but most importantly, remember to stay on track. Good night.